where there is needing an object. So I was facing a problem there.
So create an array of objects.
Yes.
Okay. Add whatever elements you want to it and pass that as the last parameter.
That's what I'm saying. It needs an needs a parameter just object, and we are passing array of object. So it was not taking it.
It was not taking an array.
Yeah, it was showing an error that it needs to be an object and not an array of object.
Okay.
So that same thing will happen with list. So list and object.
List also should work. I'll try and show you that code. That also should work actually, ideally. So okay, that reminds me, yesterday you asked the question and then I forgot to answer that question. That was, you had asked, I think, regarding the dictionary syntax or whatever. Right?
Yes, the immediate execution we had on day before yesterday.
Okay. Yeah, so I'll just open that example one second. I didn't show you yesterday because I thought I'll show it at the, when I get 2-3 minutes time at the end of the session, but we ran over time in that. So let me just open that link example. Is my screen visible or no?
No, sir, not right now. It is, sir. No,
yes. So this was my link example. No, this is not my link example. One second. We are on day 9 on link, is it?
Yes, sir.
Not even day 9, I think day 8.
Yeah.
So where we are trying to do this, we wanted to do a 2 dictionary. I need to create a dictionary out here. Let's say I want, let's say the employee number as the, dictionary object, key out here. And okay, func of employee comma t. So take e as a parameter and return e dot employee. Now the key that you're giving here becomes the key for the dictionary. So I don't know what I was doing the other day. I think I was returning e only, and that was what was causing it.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Yeah. What are the other thing that you were saying was
in parameterized thread start, or yesterday also we tried to tried to pass objects. We tried to pass strings, but then we could have been able to pass any object. So in that we had 3 options. So one is we need to make a class, and the other 2 were array of object and list of object.
Okay, this is not that threading.
So day 9, I guess then. Or I think even here also, you in task examples you would be able to do that, because that is also thread.
Okay, let me open that same one, because then I have that code ready. So this is where we are using the parameterized thread stack. Let's say static void F3, which takes an object as a parameter. And create an array. So let's say so this is what I was actually saying.
Don't know then, sir. What might be the problem?
Was it giving a compilation error or runtime error?
Compilation error, sir. So there was a red underline.
So were you changing the signature here?
Might be the problem.
So that is the issue. The issue is that parameterized threads that requires the signature of the function to be the same.
Right.
So whatever object you're passing here, that is okay. This is okay. Any object you can pass here because object is the base class of everything. But this, if you try changing this, that would give you a problem. So that is what your error is.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Yeah. Any other queries or questions?
Sir.
Yeah.
Sir, how will be the array of how will be the object class will be the base class for array of objects?
Because the base class of all arrays is array. Right? All arrays in .NET inherit from array class. And the base class of array class itself is object.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Any other queries? All right. Yeah. Is there a question? Okay. So one of the queries in the lab that was yesterday was regarding the sync call versus an async call using await. Okay. So there was one doubt that came up and how is it different or whatever. And I just explained it to you yesterday without showing you the example. So I just said that when you, Kaustubh, I think your mic is on.
Yes, sir.
What I said yesterday was that if you're using a UI, that's where it makes a difference. So I had actually shown some code in here wherein this is the code I was doing. And I said that this does a waiting call, all right? And the other one wherein you are writing code directly and you're calling a method without doing an await and you are directly calling that method, that was a blocking call. That is what I just said. And I didn't sort of illustrate that with an example. So let me just, I didn't code that yesterday, but I, after the session ended, I went and I added a little bit of code out there. So let me show you this, small example out here. So I've written similar code to what I wrote yesterday, but this time I'm doing it in a WinForm example. So WinForm as a UI, all right? So check this out. This is your synchronous code. Synchronous code is you're simply calling that function. So look at this code, what is it doing out here? What am I doing in the button click? What is this doing?
So calling a long running code function.
Right. So let's say this function takes a very long time to complete and I have given it like, it runs just running a loop so many times, and that all that it's doing is saying j is equal to I, and at the end of it is returning j. So this code is going to take a very long time to run, maybe a few seconds to run. Okay. After which I'm trying to print the value of j. Okay. Now let me show you this first with, this is a synchronous call. Now when you make a synchronous call, that function that you're calling is running on the main thread. Now, if the main thread is busy doing that code, then that main thread cannot be used for any UI related work. So it's almost as if the system is hanging. I'll show you what I mean by that. When I run this, right? So I'm calling sync code, and then the end of the code, what am I doing? The line number 23, what am I doing? Line number 23, what am I doing? Just displaying that value of j into this label. So keep your eyes on the label. Okay, keep your eyes on the label. Now I'm moving my form from here to here. Of course, this works perfectly. There's no problem in this. But see what happens when I call the code. When I'm not clicked on the code as yet. When I call the code, what's going to happen? It's going to be busy doing that code. And there's only a single thread that's running. So because there is a single thread running busy doing that code, it is not going to allow you to do any other UI operation. UI operation involves what? Moving a window, resizing a window, so on and so forth. Clicking somewhere, whatever, all of that will not work. So see what happens. I call sync code, and this is taking time. I'm trying to move a window. I'm actually trying to move a window. I don't know if you can see my mouse pointer, but I moved that window to the right. Now, unless that function is over, right now my hands are out. I'm not moving the window now. Only when the function gets over and it completes that code, will the thread be now available for the UI operations. So it takes a few seconds. Maybe I should have kept it lesser. I don't know. But if you notice now the window has moved. So it shows you done so and so, and now the window has moved. So I moved the window a few seconds back. But because that thread was blocked, doing what? Doing that same operation, the UI operations could not take place. Are you getting what I'm trying to say? Now I'll do the same thing using the second example. In the second example, I'm doing the same code, but this time I'm using await. So await is now a non-blocking call. Non-blocking call means what? The main thread is not blocked, waiting for this function to complete. It is waiting for the function to complete, yes. But the main thread is also available for performing UI operations. So let's try running the same thing. I'm doing exactly the same code. No changes there. And if I run this now, right, I'm calling await, but now the window is responsive. Why is this responsive? What is the reason for it being responsive? I can do different things here. Why can I do all of this?
So main thread is available.
Because it's a non-blocking call, right? It is a non-blocking call. That main function is not, main thread is not busy doing this. This is running as a separate task out here for you. Are you clear on this? So this is what I was trying to tell you all yesterday, but it is very difficult to explain this in a console app. Because the console app doesn't have a UI. So I can't show you a UI operation. Oh, it's not moving, it's not doing this. So this was what, I don't remember now who asked me the question. Somebody came into the lab session and asked me the question. So I said, okay, I'll explain it tomorrow with a coding. Yeah. So anyway, now the function got over a few seconds later while you were talking. But in the meanwhile, what is happening? The other things could happen very easily. So I've just done the same code, yesterday's code only. Same code. What we did yesterday, right? What we did yesterday here, this one. Only thing here yesterday, this function returning a string. The function that I have written returns a long. That's the only difference. Other than that, it's identical code to yesterday. Yeah. Any queries, any questions about this? So hopefully this is clearer. Okay. Any other queries before we start? All right. So this is what I had asked you all to do yesterday, that reflection example. And I asked you all to, I had just started off on that. And then I had asked you all to complete that example in the lab. All right. Just for my curiosity, I'm not going to ask you, okay, no, why haven't you done it or whatever. Just for my curiosity, just so that I know what is the status. How many of you all completed this reflection example in the lab yesterday? Can you put in the chat window a yes or a no? Whether you're completed or not completed. Yes for completed, no for not completed. Can you answer in the chat window? I'll request everybody to answer. So just so that I get a sense of. All right. Okay. So the majority who have answered have all said no. There are maybe 5 or 6 people who have probably tried this out. But I'm going to carry on further now. I can't wait for you all in terms of, ideally I said you all should have tried this out. So you all know all the classes that are there, and that will help me in today's code. But, those who have tried it out will understand this better than those who have not tried it out. All right, you all can stop answering. Thank you. Because now all those who answer will be no only. All those yeses have already come. So just to take you back to what I was doing yesterday, what I was doing here is looping, firstly showing you the assembly, giving you the details about the assembly, and then you had different methods like assembly.getTypes. GetTypes gave you what? What did getTypes return here?
All the types.
What is the type?
Class.
Right. So now when you say class, that's correct. But there are 5 types in .NET. The 5 types in .NET are: one is class, interface, delegate,
enum,
struct, and enum. Right. So these are the 5 basic types out here. Generally, when you say type, it generally means class. So why I'm saying this is because in a lot of books you will use that it's using this type. So it generally means class, but it could also mean any of these other types. All right. So this is what effectively we have. So this is giving you all the types in here, which is basically all the 5 basic types that you have. Then for each type, you can get in details like get methods. We tried this yesterday. We talked about it. We didn't try it out. So there was a get properties, there was a get constructors, there was a get events. So everything that you wanted to know about that type, you could get out there. The get methods itself again had what? Get methods again, you can, after you get the methods here, you could get the parameters to the method. And this is the code that I had asked you to do yesterday. So even today, you can complete this code. I had given you a start. I think I had done the for each loop for the type. And I had just shown you how to get the methods, and I had told you what to do in there, but I had not completed that code. So this is what I had asked you to do yesterday. Now, this example on reflection allowed me to see what is there in the assembly. Any assembly that I have, I can open that assembly and see what are the contents of the assembly using reflection. I'm going to take that one step further today. And today what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an object of a class without adding a reference to it. And to do that, I will again use reflection. So I will not just see what is there in the assembly, but I will also, like for example, if I find out details about a type, I can instantiate that type. I can create an object of that type. Or if I have a method, if I find out from the type what are the methods in there, not just find out about the method, but I can actually go and call that method. So that's the code that I'm going to run with you out here today. Okay. And give me a minute while I open that code of mine. I don't know whether I opened it. I don't think I opened it. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll first just run this code and show you. Okay, this is not the one. 1 second. This is the same thing that I opened. Yeah, this is the one. Okay. So I'll show you what I'm doing out here. I have created 2 assemblies out here, 3 assemblies out here. One assembly called as an India calculator. Okay. And let me show you the code for that also. So if you look at this India calculator, all that I'm doing is I'm having a class called tax calculator. Very simple class, which has 1 property and 1 method. I'm going to create an object of this class. I'm going to set this property and I'm going to call this method. These are 3 things that I will do. So create an object of this class, set the property, also get the property, both, and call this method. This is what I'm going to do using reflection. Okay. Now, similar to this class, now look at the code for the India calculator. What does it return here in this case? Whatever is the basic into 2. All right. So this is what it's returning. So very simple code out here, not very complex. Similarly, I have a US calculator. Okay, which has a similar class out here, and see what this returns. So this is the US calculator. It returns, basic salary into 1.5 rather than multiplying by 2. And same way, I have a UK calculator. Right. So the UK calculator just returns basic into 1.25. So this is what I've done out here. Now, using reflection, I will load one of these 3 libraries. Okay. Using reflection, I'll load one of these 3 libraries and call the code on that. So this is what I have. Okay. Before I run the code, I ran the code, but before I ran the code, I'll show you that I don't have a reference to any of these. I don't have a reference to India calculator, UK calculator, or US calculator. I don't have a reference to that. In spite of not having a reference, I'm going to call code from that assembly. So let's try loading that assembly. All right. And this is what I'm using. So I'm using the UK calculator.dll. 10,000 was the basic that I set. So I've set the basic to 10,000. I've hard coded that value of 10,000. And now it will give me the calculated salary. So it will be basic into, for UK it was 1.25. So that is the calculated value. Okay. Same way I can go and add another this thing. Let's say I add the India calculator. And I load one of the assemblies there. Let's say India calculator. And this in case, I pick up the basic as 10,000 again. But the calculated value now is into 2, basic into 2, which is 20,000. So this is what I've done in my code. So this is what I'm doing out here. Now, where can this be useful? This can be useful where the assembly to load is decided by the user. So I'll give you an example of where I could create this. Let's say I'm creating a payroll package. Okay. Now the payroll package I want to create for different countries. And I want to create a payroll package for India, UK, US, and I should be able to sell it in any country. Okay. Now let's say every country has different laws for calculation of tax. So supposing you had India, there's a different tax slab in different ways. In the UK, there'll be a different one. In the US, there'll be a different one. In other countries, there's a different one. Now, at runtime, I will ask him, which country does he want to apply this tax calculation bracket? And based on the one that he selects, we can then pick that up. So the different assemblies will have these different pieces of code in there. Now, what this also allows me to do is, supposing I sell it today to a country whose code I have not written. Let's say I sell it to whatever, let's say, France, for example. Now, if I sell the software in France, at the time of writing my code, I have not written code for France. But after I sell it to them, I have to just give them that DLL. Now, that DLL can be made by anybody. That DLL will contain what? The code for the tax calculation of France. So my basic software doesn't have to be touched. Only I have to give that extension library, which is the extra DLL for tax calculation out there. And again, at runtime, I can now pick up which one I want to select out here. So this makes your code extensible as well. Because at the time of writing code, you're not written that assembly. You're loading that assembly at runtime. So this is what I'm trying to drive here with this reflection example. Okay. Now that we have seen how it works, let's now go into the code. So now again, there is a UI component. It's very difficult to do this in the console app wherein I'm asking the user to enter a file and all of that. So the first thing is, of course, when I click on the button, what am I doing out here? What am I doing out here? Can you make out what it's doing out here? Open file dialog 1 dot show dialog. So what do you think this code is doing here when I click on the button? Show dialog, what is this doing?
So open a file. Select a file.
Yeah, showing him a dialog box where he can select a file. Now, once he selects a file, once he says open on that dialog box, so he selects a file and he says open, that's when this code will run. That's when open file dialog dot file OK will run. And that's where all my other code is running. So when he selects the file, this is what I'm doing. So look at the first line out here. What do you think this is doing? What do you think this is doing?
So opening an assembly or the DLL file that we are trying to load.
Which I'm giving in the dialog box, right? Whichever file I'm giving the dialog box that I'm loading in. What did we do yesterday? Yesterday we did what? We did a hard-coded value. So instead of a hard-coded value, yesterday, if in the code, in fact, we had not used load, we had not used open file dot file name or whatever. We have given a string out there containing the actual code out there. Now, once you have given that, option to the user could select the one that he wants to select. So this is similar to yesterday's code, except for instead of hard coding the value, I'm picking it up from the user. Now, what I want to do actually is this line of code. I want to write down this line of code. I want to create an object of that tax calculator class. But I will not be allowed to do so. Why can't I do that? Why can't I directly type out tax calculator? Why can't I directly do that? Why is this not allowed to me? Why is line number 30 not okay? What is the reason for line number 30? That tax calculator is the class I showed you some time back, which is there in the other DLL.
We are using that assembly at runtime.
So what is the problem? For line number 30 to work, what do you need to do first?
We have to have a copy of that DLL file.
And what else? In Visual Studio, what you have to do? What is that called?
Reference.
Correct. So you have to add a reference first. Unless you add a reference, you can't write line number 30. Correct? So I cannot create an object in this way, the way I've been creating all along, because I'm going to add that assembly at runtime. So at the time of writing code, I don't know what the assembly is. Does that make sense? So this cannot be done. Line number 30 cannot be done. I cannot do this. So what am I forced to do? Look at the line that I'm doing out here. I'm going to create an activator.create instance. So activator, there's a class called activator, system.activator. This create instance creates an object of that class, which I'm specifying out here. Now, which class am I giving out here? Look at what create instance takes as a parameter here. What is it taking as a parameter?
Type.
A type. So what I'm doing here is, look at the earlier line. I'm saying type T is equal to assembly.getType. Does this method look familiar? Get type.
Yes.
This is what we had used yesterday. We had used get types. S. Get types gave you all the types in there. But get type is giving you what? One particular type, one particular class is given. And what am I doing out here? What is this now? This is giving me the name of the assembly. And I'm hard coding the class name as stacks calculator. I'm hard coding it as stacks calculator. Now, I could have not hard coded it and given him a list of options, shown him a list of types. If you look at your code yesterday, we had said get types gives you all the types. So I could have shown him a list of types and said, please select one type from it. So I could have eliminated this hard coding also, but I'm not making it that generic. You can make it as generic as possible. You can make it as, user defined as possible, but I'm introducing some hard coded values. I'm saying I'm creating an object of the stacks calculator class, but the name of the assembly will keep changing. Now, while doing this, there are some overloads that you have. First is throw an exception if that type is not present. So if that class is not present, it should throw an exception. And second one is, do you want to ignore case? So uppercase, lowercase, do you want to ignore that? So I've given both as true. So this gave me the type, and activator.create instance gave me an object of that type. So this line here, line number 33, is a substitute for line number 30. Right? So what you're doing here, okay, actually, let's call this as obj. Right? What you're doing here is being done here. Are we clear on this, everybody? Now, once we have created the object, I want to do two things. I want to firstly work with its property. Second thing is I want to work with its method. So look at line number 37. And yesterday we had type.getProperties. I talked about it. I didn't show you the code, but I talked about it. I said that you can get all information about a type out there. And I asked you all to try out the code out there. But getProperty single is giving you information about one property. Which property am I getting information from? About is basic. Now, instead of hard coding it, could I have asked the user to select a property out here? Is it possible to do that? Is it possible to know what are the properties, give him a list and select one from there?
Yes.
Yes. So get properties would have given you all the properties and ask the user to select one from there. So even though I'm hard coding the value here, in reality, if I had to write down code for it, it's very easy to do so. Okay. So this gave me a property. Now what I want to do is object.basic equal to 10,000. I want to do that. I want to do this object.basic equal to 10,000. But if I did obj dot, what would I get out here? If I did obj dot, what am I getting out here? What are these?
Only object methods.
Object method, because obj is of type object. So what I'm doing next is I'm doing it the other way around. With having got the property info, you have an option here which says property dot set value. Set is calling the set. Set value is calling the set. So this is like doing, if you say p dot set value, you do p dot set value. It's like saying some object dot basic and equal to the value that you're giving. So what are the parameters with set value? First is for which object you want to set the value. I want to set it for obj. Secondly, what is the second parameter? Second parameter is what?
Value of the object.
Actual value that you want to set. So I'm setting it as 10,000. And third thing is if you are using an indexer, we saw the code for an indexer, then here the array of the indexer. So this is the third possibility out here. If you're using indexers, then this third thing would come in here. Are we clear on this, everybody? So this is the alternative to doing this. Now, after setting the property, I'm doing the reverse. What is the next line doing? P dot get value. What is this doing? It's calling the get. It's reading the property. So P dot get value for which object? Object here is obj. This object here. Secondly, if you're using an indexer, then the index of that. So this is what we're giving here. Now we're not using an indexer, so I'm leaving that as null. And then I'm showing that in a message box. So when you ran the code, I don't know if you remember when I ran the code, it first showed you 10,000. So that 10,000 that was being shown was this p dot get value. So this is how you can set a value or get a value. Get a value with get property, with get value, and set a value with set value. After which, what do I want to do? Next is I want to call this. I want to call this method obj.getNetSal. That is the method that I want to call. But obviously I can't call it directly. So I get a method info which says p.getMethod. And I'm keep saying that you all have tried it out. You always supposed to have tried this out yesterday, where you had tried out get methods. So that was returning an array of method info. But now instead of calling get methods, I'm asking you to call get method, which gives you a single method. So name the method here is getNetSal. And then you got your method info. Once you have a method info, you call method info.invoke. For which object you want to invoke this method? For which object you want to invoke? For this object obj out here. Secondly, null. Any guesses what this could be? Before I tell you, could you tell me the answer? What do you think this would be? The second one out here.
Indexer.
In a method, what would you have?
Okay, parameter.
Parameters to the method. So this again is an object array. Right? This is an object array of containing all the values. Supposing that method had parameters, then put the parameters into an object array and pass that value. Are we clear on this? And that's where you're calling the method, and then I'm displaying the return value. So this is a small snippet of what you can do to call the methods or properties of an object, also create an object using reflection. Okay. Now this can be made into a full-fledged example. When, again, you're not having WinForms out here, but I could give him an option on screen 1, which says that choose the assembly. After he chooses the assembly, I can give him a list of classes there and say which class you want to create an object of. Once he creates an object of the class, I can show him all the methods and properties in a list out there and ask him which property do you want to set or which method you want to call out there. And then I can go and call that method. So it can be very flexible code that I'm actually writing out here. I'm not giving a full-fledged example. At least try this out. It will give you a good start into how to call a method, how to call a property using reflection. Any questions, any doubts about any of this? Okay. Now, when you're trying it out in a console app, you will try my code in the console app. What will you change out here? What will happen here now?
The hard code values will have to be.
Either you hard code a value, that's one possibility, or you ask the user to type out the whole path. Okay, accept it from the user, accept the whole path, which is painful to do. I mean, so hard coding the value would be okay out here in this example. All right, questions if any? Okay, so I would be, sharing this entire folder out here with y'all, and then the other assemblies that you're using are also in this same folder. So they are okay. The Windows Form application 1 is the one that contains the code for the reflection example, and then you had this US, UK, and India calculators, which are containing the actual code for the India calculator, UK calculator, US calculator. So if you go in there, the class 1 in there contains that code. Okay. All right. The third thing that I had asked you to do was read up on reflection.emit. While explaining reflection, I had said that is the third possibility that you can do. So reflection.emit allows you to create your assemblies, but for that you need to know IL well. Okay, so even if you don't try that example out, at least read up on it, so you know that there is something that can be done that way, and if required, then later you can go and try that example. All right. Moving away from reflection, we are going into another example. Okay, the next example that we're going to work with is working with files and seeing how you can actually, manipulate files, find out details about maybe files, directories, drives, basic operations like create a file, read a file, right? All these things we'll be doing. Now, the thing to remember when you're working with files is that files are treated like a stream. Okay, so what is a stream? When you talk about a stream in programming, what do you mean by a stream? You would have also heard the word streaming, for example, nowadays. So what do you understand by the word stream?
So it is a collection of characters.
Yeah, correct. So it's basically a set of bytes. When you said you're streaming something or when you're reading something as a stream, is basically a set of bytes. Now, there are two basic operations that you would be doing out here. You'd be either writing to a stream or you will be reading from a stream. Whatever data that you have, when you write it to a stream, it is converted into a set of bytes. First operation is what? Write to a stream. So convert it to a set of bytes. Second option here is reading from a stream. So the stream contains a set of bytes. You might want to read from the stream and convert it into a format that you recognize. Let's say, for example, a string. So the set of bytes is now converted into a string, for example, or you could convert into other types also. So two basic operations that you're doing, writing and reading from a string. You have already done that. You'll have already done that. Now, when have you worked with the stream here in .NET? The first line of code that you did, first line of code that you all wrote into a stream. What is the first line of code that you all wrote? What is the first line of code that you all wrote in .NET?
Console.write.
Console.write line. So when you do a write line, the console also is treated as a stream. So what are you doing with the write line? You're passing it a string, and that string is being converted into a stream of bytes. So that was the first line that you wrote. The second line that you wrote was console.readLine, a second different method that you wrote. So what would read line do in this case? Again, what is it doing? It's reading from the stream. All right. So that's the basic concept of a stream. Everything that you're, having is when it gets into a stream is represented as a stream of bytes, a set of bytes, and can be either written or read that way. Now there are two techniques involved in working with this. The first technique involves writing a raw set of bytes into the stream. So whatever data that you have has to be converted into bytes, into a byte array, and that can be written into the stream. That is the first technique. So whatever you have is converted into what? Into an array of bytes, and then you put that into the stream. That is one way of working with it. Similarly, while reading it, you read it as what? An array of bytes. That could be one way of doing it. The second way of doing it is using formatted input and output. So while writing to it, you don't write it as an array of bytes. You can send it, let's say, for example, as a string, or you could send it, let's say, as a different data type, for example, which internally it will convert into a set of bytes. And this is what is referred to as formatted output or formatted input when you're reading the values. So we're going to cover both techniques. One is how to write it as a byte array. Secondly, how to write it as a string. When using console.writeLine, what are you using out there? Are you using a byte array or using a string? What are you using there with console.writeLine? Most of the times, what are you using?
String.
Most of the time you're using string. But you'll find that WriteLine also has a method for writing a byte array into that. So that is the other option also that is available to you. So we'll consider both options out here. So basically, whatever we are working with is, file related, is in the system.io namespace. We'll have to start off with adding, using on that. Right. So using system.io, everything that you're working is being done there. To keep my example, easily understood by you, I have kept it in the Web Forms example. But you will try this out in a console app. Try this out in the console app out here for you. Okay. I've just got different code in here. Now, when you open my project, you all may not have worked with this before. When you open my project, you need to open this form1.cs, and to see the code, just double click on any of the buttons out here, and it'll take you into the code for that button. So for example, if you want to see the code for directories or for drives or for files, whatever you want. So you double click on that button out. Okay. And that takes you into the code for that. Now, one of the first objects that we'll be looking at here is the drive info object. Where are all these coming in from? Drive info. Where is this coming in from? Which namespace? System.io. So make sure you've added a using on that. The drive info takes one of the drives as a parameter. And if you look at the properties of drive, this gives you everything that you need to know about a drive. Right? I'm not going through all the properties, but if you can just read through some of them. First one, you tell me what it is. Available free space. What do you think this would be? What is this?
Space
Available on drive.
Space available on the drive or drive format, right? So you have different drive formats. Older operating systems have different drive, NTFS, FAT, 32, whatever. So what are the drive format out here? Drive type. You all probably have never even seen one. Have you all heard of something called as the floppy disk?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Heard about it? may not have seen it. But anyway, the different types of drives that you could have. Of course, you have now the newer types of drives, the CD-ROM drive, and then the external drives and whatnot. So this gives you details about the drive type and so on and so forth. Whether a drive is ready to be read or not, so on and so forth. Okay. All of these details are giving you details about the drive. Okay. Explore this. I'm not going to go into all of these properties. See these properties and see what it gives you. Once you're finished looking at the drive, the second thing you can look at is a directory. So how do you get there? You double click on the, the code out here and it takes you out here. Now you can work with the directory in two ways. There are two different objects or two different classes that are available to you. One called directory and one called directory info. Most of the methods in there are common, but there might be some methods available in one which are not available in the other. So if you look at directory, this is all static methods. If you look at directory dot, all of these are static methods available here, right? All of these. Okay, let's explore a couple of them. Let's say, for example, create directory. What do you think this would do? I'm actually using that on line number 25. What do you think create directory would do?
Creates new directory.
Creates a directory. As simple as that. What does it return? See what it returns.
Directory info.
A directory info. So that directory info will give you information about that particular directory that has been created. Okay. Other methods. I'm not even telling you. You explain to me what it does. Dot delete. What do you think that would do? Yes.
Delete the directory.
There are no prizes for guessing this. This answer is in the question itself. Right? Okay. Get files. Any guesses what that would do?
Get file from directory.
So it returns what? Look at what it returns.
All the files that the directory
An
contains.
array of strings.
Array of strings.
Returns all the files, in that directory. Set current directory. Now this would be useful, if you set a directory and then you perform some operations on that. So ignore this. Even if you are looking at it, ignore this. Don't worry about this. It's easier to call the other methods in a better way. Okay, one more I'll check up. Exist. What do you think this would do? Will return a true or a false. When will it return true or false?
Whether the file is available or not.
Not file.
Directory.
We are talking about directories, no? So you're checking for whether a directory is there or not. Okay. And there are other methods also, like all these get methods, giving you information about the directories, right? When it was created, what are the access control on that, who can access the directory, what are the security permissions, right? So on and so forth. Okay, directory.move is allowing you to move a directory from one location to the other location, and so on and so forth. So multiple such methods available here. Try them out. The other option of working with a directory was using a directory info class. Now this does not have any static method, so to say. So you have to create an object of this class and then do that. So what do you think I have done out here? What am I doing out here? I'm actually getting a reference to that directory. And once I get a reference to that directory, I can get details about that directory. So name of the directory, full name of the directory, files in the directory, whether it exists or not, and so on and so forth. So you'll find some of them are similar, like .create, .delete. Some of these are similar, right? The get method, some of them are all also available in the other way. So you can work with this. Both of them are giving you similar values for working with the directory. So try these out. I'm not going to explain these. The other option that you have is if you had to work with files. So just like you had directory and directory info, here again you have what? File and file info. By the same logic, what will file contain? What will file contain? Just like
Static
directory.
methods.
Static methods for working with the files. And what will file info contain? File info. This would be, you need to create an object of this class, and then object dot would give you properties about that file or information about that file or how to manipulate that file. So if you look at file dot, I'm going to be using file dot. Quite a few of these methods I'm going to be using. So things like commonly used ones are file dot create, creating a new file. File dot move. File dot move is actually renaming a file. They call it move, but what are you doing out here? You're renaming a file out here. Okay. Dot delete, deleting a file, and then opening it in different modes, finding out whether a file exists or not, and so on and so forth. Plus few other things also. Append all text, append all lines is basically allowing you to add text to it, create a text file. So I'm going to show you some of these methods in the example below. So I'm not covering them here. Similarly, if you had worked with a file info object, and then if you said file dot, these give you properties of that file. Okay, so do try this out, explore this. You do see all these methods. I'm not going to explain what these are. All right. Let's move to something more substantial, and let's see how we can write to a file. And then of course, we're going to be reading to a file. The two ways that we talked about, what are the first way? We work with raw data. We work with a byte array, because you're going to be working with streams out here. So there's a class called file stream, and a file stream class inherits from the stream class. So that's the one that we're going to be working with. All right. So this is the class that I'm going to be working with, file stream. And what are the methods that the file stream would have? Two methods it will have mainly. One would be write to that stream. Secondly would be to read from that stream. So here is where you're working with the raw data. Now, we saw the file class sometime back. Remember this class? File, right? So I'm using this file dot. One of the methods out here is file dot open. And see what open returns. Open returns what? A file stream. Okay, a file stream. If you look at a file stream class, the file stream class inherits from where? Inherits from a stream class. All right. So all files typically are treated as streams of data. You're writing it into a stream of data. Okay. Let's focus on the open method itself. There are different overloads to this. I'm using this one, which takes a path and file mode. So path is self-explanatory, which file you want to open. Second thing here is file mode. Now look at the file mode. File mode is actually an enum. If you look at the file mode, this is actually an enum. And let's see what are the different possible file modes that you had. Okay, so now this is important. This is understanding how the file is going to get created. File mode will tell you that. Let's start with create. When you choose file mode dot create, then if the file does not exist, it creates it. And if the file exists, then it overwrites the file and you lose the contents of the previous file. So new file is created with no content in it. and it is overwriting the previous file. So file.create will always work if the file exists. If the file exists, it will overwrite it. And if it does not exist, then it will create it. Okay. So I'm opening it in this. Now again, when you're doing this, it's actually, you're going to be using this to write to a file. When you're creating a new file, what are you doing? You can't obviously be reading from it. You'll be writing to it. Are we clear on the first one? File.create. Make a note of these because 2-3 of them are very similar. And this will be asked of you in the exam. I'm not joking. I'm serious. They will ask you about these file notes in the exam. If they don't ask you, I will ask you. A lot of times, questions come to me just before sir, what is there in the exam? What should we study? Now, when I'm teaching you, I'm telling you that this is going to be asked. I'm going to ask you this. So don't ask me later what is there in the exam. I'm telling you right now only, it is going to be asked. 100%. 100% there will be a question on GAC. Yesterday we did GAC. Shared assemblies. 100% there will be a question on GAC. And if not here in the interview, they'll ask. Okay. So anyway, coming back to this. I hope create is clear. Yeah. Now, if the file existed, what is create going to do every time? Every time it will overwrite the file. Instead of create, if I chose append, as the name suggests, what do you think it will do? Append to the file. What does that mean? What will that mean? Append
add to the existing file.
It will add to that existing file. Now, if a file is not present initially, if it is not present, it will create it. But if the file is already present, then it will add to that file. So that's a append. Does not overwrite the file, it simply adds to it. Okay. Are we clear with append? Okay. Create new. Now, when you saying create new, it says that I want to create a new file only. I don't want an existing file to be overwritten. I want to create a new file only. So if the file is not already present, then it's okay. Then there's no problem. Then it will work fine. But if that file was already present, then create new will throw a exception. And it's actually giving you here, if you read this line here, it gives you an explanation. You don't even need me for this. I don't know why I'm doing all of this. Don't tell CDAC that all the answers are there in Visual Studio only. We don't need Vikram for telling us this. Don't tell them that. Don't tell CDAC. But answers are here in front of you. Specifies that the operating system should create a new file. It requires the following permissions. If the file already exists, an IO exception is thrown. That's your create new. So when you're trying these things out, you have to try this out. See what are the files is present, then what will happen if I did create? What are the files present? What will happen if I did append? What will happen if I did create new? You have to try this out so that you know how it works. Are we clear on this? All right. Now, truncate on the other hand, okay, is the reverse. It says that the file should be there. Create new said what? What did create new say? Create new said what? File should not be there. If the file is there, then what? If the file is there, what?
It will throw an exception.
It will throw an exception. Now here truncate says that the file should be present. It should be an existing file. But when I open it, its size will become 0. It will remove everything from that file. It will truncate everything from the file. Are we clear on this, everybody? So this is an opposite of create new. Create new said file should not be there. Truncate said file should be there. All right. In both cases, what's going to happen? There's going to be no content in the file. Other than append, in all of the creates there, create new, in truncate also, it is not having any content in there. It's losing the content. Okay. Open is for opening an existing file. Right? Open is for opening an existing file. So if the file is not present, what will happen? You're trying to open a file which is not present. What will happen?
File not
File
found.
Exception.
Exception. So look at the help out there. It tells you which exception. A file not found exception is thrown if the file does not exist. Are we clear on this?
So truncate will also throw an exception if the file is not
Yeah.
found.
Yeah.
Which one
Yes.
exactly?
I'm not sure what, but look out for the documentation. It may
Okay.
be a file not found. Okay. Now, if you are opening a file, typically you're opening it in read mode. You'd like to open it in read mode. Okay. So that's how you would open a file. So if you want to read it, right now in this code, I'm writing to a file, but you will also have to read to a file. So reading the file, you will open it in the open mode. Now, if you want to do both, if you want to open it as well as write to it or read from it, then you have the open or create. All right. Open or create will do what? If it is already present, it will open it. And if it is not present, it will create it. Now, how is this different from the create methods that we saw earlier? This open or create also allows you to read from a file as well as write to it. So this is the read write access. Open is only read access. All the others are only write access. But open or create is your read write access. Are we clear on this? So this is how you're actually opening or closing the files or working with these different options out here. All right. So first time I'm running the code, I'd like to open it in the create mode. I'm doing it in the create mode. I'm writing to a file. This was my original code. Now, what does write take as a parameter? See what it took as a parameter. So I've got a file stream object and stream.write. What are the three things it takes out here as a parameter? First is the byte array. Secondly is the offset. How many characters or how many bytes should it leave before writing into that stream? And thirdly, count. How many such bytes, total number of bytes to be written. So I want to actually write a hello world. That's what I want to do in this file. I want to simply write a hello world. So my hello world, I've got it as a string. I want to convert it to a byte array. Why convert to a byte array? Because the write is taking a byte array. So to convert it to a byte array, this is one way of doing this. Encoding.default.get bytes. So you pass a string and you get a byte array from it. Once I have the byte array, what am I saying? Write leaving 0 characters. So start from position 0. And how many characters to write? How many characters to write?
Up to the length.
Length of the array. Right? So this is written a hello world in there. At this point, I have opened the stream. Whatever you have opened, make sure you close it. So just before you end your program, what would you be doing out here is a stream.close. Are we clear on this? All right. So what is this code doing? Right? If you ignore the comments, what is this code doing? Simply is doing what? Writing a hello world into this file, into the c:\a.txt. a.txt. What if I want to read from this file? What will be the reverse of write?
Read.
Stream.read. So tell me the code for reading from the file. First thing is open it in what mode? Open it in what mode?
So read modes.
Open mode.
Yeah, open
There's
mode.
no read mode. There's a file mode dot open. So that's how you're opening it for reading it. Instead of a stream.write, you're going to give what? A stream.read. See what stream.read returns? Returns number of bytes read, but it reads it into a byte array. Offset is how many characters you want to leave, how many bytes you want to leave before you start reading from there. And count is number of characters to read. So if you look at the parameters of read, these parameters are identical to the parameters of write. So what would be the difference here? How do you work with read? First thing is you'll have to create the byte array. Right? Now, how many characters should you create in the byte array? What should be the byte array? What should be the size of the byte array? How many characters should it be? When you want to read from a file, how many characters should a byte array be? Supposing the file had 50 characters. So what should be the size of your array?
50. 100 by 50.
50. You get what I'm trying to say? So what should be the size of the array? The size of the array should be the number of characters that are there in the file. Yes or no? If you'd like to read from that file, you just read total number of characters. So how do I know how many characters are there in that file? You have a property here called stream.length. Stream.length will tell you total number of characters that are there, number of bytes that are there in the file. So create your array of this size and then do a stream.read, which will read the values into an array. Once you read the values into an array, this array is an array of bytes. This array will be an array of bytes. After which, what do you need to do? What do you need to do with the array of bytes?
Decode it.
Convert it back into a string. So look out for help on how to do that. I'm not going to give you the help. Figure out how you can convert from an array of bytes into a string. Okay, and then display the string. Are you clear on this?
Yes.
So I am not giving you the code for reading from the file. You're going to do that on your own. Hint, not hint, I've actually given you the code only. What have I told you? File mode dot open. Instead of stream.write, you're going to use stream.read. Create an array based on the stream.length. Okay, so to do in the lab, complete the code for reading from the file. Now, all this code that we use, okay, all this code that we use on top, this was for working with an array of bytes. So unformatted output. Now, instead of working with an array of bytes, you can work with formatted output. And to work with formatted output, instead of using a file stream class, you're going to use a stream writer class. Now, the stream writer allows you to write to any stream. The stream writer is not related to files, but stream writer can be used to write to any stream. I showed you some time back what is file stream class? Where does this inherit from? File stream inherits from where?
Stream.
From string. So you can write to a file stream as well. Okay. So stream writer is used to write to a stream. Look at what writer dot. Okay, before we go there, how do I get that stream? So you have an option here for file dot create text. What is create text returning to you? What is this method returning to you? Returning a stream writer. File dot open returned what? A file stream. But file dot create text returned a stream writer. So I'm getting the stream writer. And what is writer dot write line? What is this doing for you? Any guesses? Writer dot write line. What is that doing? Writing into the stream writer. If you look at write line, does this look familiar?
Console.com.
Correct. It has similar parameters to console.writeLine. So if you use console.writeLine, then you should know how to use writer.writeLine. Are we clear on this, everybody? What is this doing? Again, writing to that file. The reverse of this. What will be the reverse of this? Give me the code for the reverse operation. Now I want to, instead of writing to a file, I want to read from the file. So what will be the code to read from the file?
So open text, file.open text.
Carry on. Don't give me snippets. Give me the whole thing. That's
Okay.
one thing. What else? Left hand side.
So stream writer.
Stream
Sorry,
writer.
stream reader.
Stream reader. And instead
Stream
of writer.writeLine.
Reader or read line.
Read line.
You all know the code. You all don't need me at all. So file dot open text. Right? What is open text returning? Returning a stream reader. Right? Instead of writer dot write line, reader dot read line. This reader dot read line is like console dot read line. What is read line going to return? What is read line going to return?
String.
String. So see what is returning. It's returning a string. Now, if the string is null, it means that there is nothing else to be read. So this is returning one line at a time. And if it returns a null, that means there's nothing more to be read in the file. Are we getting this? So what's my loop out here? Keep doing it while it is not null. At the end of this, what am I doing? After I get the value in here, what is this doing? What is this line of code?
Printing the
Doing it in the message box.
message box.
Now, if you're doing it in the console app, instead of message box.show, what would you do? What would you do there?
Console.write line.
Console.writeLine. So whatever string that you're displaying. And remember, whatever you have opened, remember to close it. So this is formatted output. This is a lot easier than doing this. Do you agree? This one is a lot easier than doing all of this. So that's the generally preferred method, the formatted output, rather than working with a byte array. But be aware of both. So let's try this code. Let's try running some of this code and seeing how it works. I'm not sure whether I have that folder AAAA. I don't remember whether I have deleted it or whether it's still there. Okay, it's still there. Let me delete this folder. All right. And let's run this code. So first thing that I'm doing here is create directory AAAA. Okay, that's the first thing that I'm trying out in this code. Okay, create a directory AAAA. What that would do is create a directory right here for me. If you notice right at the bottom, that is created this file. Hey. All right. What is the second thing that I'm doing out here? Okay, by the way, if I try clicking on create directory again, okay. Can you first check whether the directory is already there, and if it's there, tell him that it's already there. How could you do that? Can you write code for doing that? Okay. One of the methods there checked for whether a directory was there or not. So you can write down all that code. I'm not doing all of that. Okay. If I go to the directory out there, this is currently blank. Okay, it's currently blank. I have code out here which says what? Create a file called a.txt in that directory. So that's what I'm going to do. So when I click on the file, right, it creates a file called a.txt. Current size is 0 bytes. There's nothing in that. Okay. All right. Let's try this code. What is this code doing? What is this code doing?
Writing hello world into the file.
There are two lines actually, hello world, and there's a line 2 also that I've written. 2 lines that I'm writing into the file. So let's see whether I can do that. So write to a file and see what happens when I do write to a file. It says that the process cannot access the file because it is being used by another. Okay, that's one error. Let's try running this again and write to a file. Right. So this actually created the file. Now you may get errors while trying to read and write to a file based on the security permissions that you have out here. You may get errors. Okay, so the error was not because of that. Error was because it was being used, that file was in use somewhere else. So how do we ensure that Visual Studio doesn't give me an error out here? Because when you write to a file, right now it is written to a file. Right now, if you open this file, it has got that hello world and line 2 written in there. Okay, it's got these 2 things written in there. But I'm saying that Visual Studio itself might give you an error when you're trying to write to a file or read from a file, because Visual Studio may not have requisite permissions to run and to write to a file or read from a file, depending upon how your machine is configured. So when you're starting Visual Studio, do this, right click on Visual Studio and run it as an administrator. And that will give you the requisite permissions if it gives you the problem with permissions. Right? So you run Visual Studio as an administrator, and then this issue of, if it gives you an error of that would not be there. When you run it as an administrator, here on the top right, it shows you that you're actually an administrator out here. Okay. All right, let's go to the second code. What is this code doing here? This is simply reading the file and showing the values one line at a time. So read from a file. So hello world. Okay. And line 2. That is what is there in the file. Clear on this so far? The file that we worked with so far was a text file. So everything was being stored in a text format. You can also work with a binary file. And to work with the binary file, we're going to use a binary writer. And to read from a binary file, we'll be using a binary reader. So these classes allow you to write to or read from files which are having content in the binary format. I'm storing 3 things here. What are the 3 things that I'm storing? A string, an integer, and a Boolean value. Right? Now here in this case, the binary writer See what it takes as a binary writer. Takes what is the parameter? What is it taking as a parameter? Yeah, a stream as a parameter. Taking a stream as a parameter. Now to give that stream as a parameter, I have a class called file info, which has a method called open in write mode. And see what open write returns. What does this return here?
File stream.
File stream.
File stream. So I'm actually calling open write, which is returning a file stream and passing that as a parameter to binary writer. So it's going to go and write into the file given out here. At the end of this, make sure to close the binary writer. Okay. The binary writer has different overloads. If you look at the write method, what do you see out here? All of these are what? Different overloads that you see with the binary writer. Right. And again, different data types are actually supported out here. So I've actually written 3 things here. Now while reading it, you'll have to read it in the same order. So what are we first writing? We're writing a string, an integer, and a Boolean value. So while reading it also, we're going to do it, read it in the same manner. So create a file info object again. Use a binary reader. In this case, instead of open write, open it in read mode, which also returns a file stream. And now you have methods for binary reader dot write method was the same. Okay, write method was the same. But now here you have different methods for read whatever, read string, read integer, read Boolean. So different data types that you have, you would have different read methods available. So same values that I've written, I have read them. And then the second part of the code, of course, is just showing them. So this is just displaying the values out here. So write to a file. The file it's creating here is a.dat. And if I open this file and show you, this is in a binary format. So if you open a.dat, right? So you notice that some part of it is readable, but the other part of it is not readable. It's actually stored in a binary format. Let's come back and try reading the file. So when you read the file here, in this case, binary read, exactly the reverse, which is reading the values in here. Are we clear on this? Questions, if any, with these basic file operations that we have tried? We just tried writing to a text file, writing to a binary file, and writing and reading, of course. Text file, we tried 2 methods, either using a byte array or secondly using formatted output directly. Formatted output is using write line, which is similar to your console.write line. So whatever you can give in console.write line can be given here in the write line method there. Questions, if any?
Hello, sir.
Yes.
So like in binary, we can read the data in the sequence that we entered, like string, int, and then Boolean. If we don't know in what sequence is entered, then
You cannot. You cannot.
okay. So we
If
should
you don't know if if you don't know the format of a binary file, it's impossible to read it. So, which is why, like, if you look at Word, for example, And if you save a .doc file, it is actually saved in the binary format.
Okay.
So why is it saving it in the binary format? So that only Word application should know how to read it. So any other application that knows the format of a Word file will be able to read it. But if you or I try to read a Word file, then it's not possible to read. So that's the idea behind storing into a binary format. So that only people who know the format should be able to read it.
Yes, sir. Got it.
All right. I'm going to try out a variation of storing something into a file, but using a technique called as serialization. So what is serialization? When you talk about serializing something, serialization is simply converting something into a set of bytes. Okay. What is the process of serialization? To serialize something is simply to do what? Is to convert something into a set of bytes, into a specific format. Now, how is it different from, let's say, file IO? What is the difference between file IO and serialization? In file IO also, we are writing a set of bytes. Yes or no? Serialization also, we are saying what? We are converting it into a set of bytes and writing it somewhere. Typically, we'll be writing it into a file only. So what is the basic difference between serialization and file IO? Serialization generally occurs on an existing object. So the term that you use is you're serializing an object. Now an object might have a complex structure. So you don't need to write code to go through the object and work with it. There are certain inbuilt, classes or inbuilt things that happen which allow you to serialize an object without you having to write some code for it. Whereas with file IO, you have to go through the whole code. You have to decide what to write. You have to put in, what to leave out. So everything that you're doing is code intensive in file IO. You're doing everything. You, the programmer, are deciding everything. In serialization, there are certain inbuilt options that are available, which automatically do all of this for you. So you can think of this as an inbuilt mechanism for saving an object into whatever stream that you want to. And typically, in most cases, you'll be streaming it into a file. So an entire object can be stored into a file. That will be the process of serialization. And the reverse can also happen. What will you do with the reverse process? Read the value from the file and recreate the object. All right. So wherein file IO, as I said, typically happens where you are deciding what to do with it and how you're writing to it and what to store in it, whether to store a string, how to store the string, all of that. Serialization generally happens for an object of a class. Okay. Now, where is this useful? Where is serialization useful? Any objects that you create are not permanently stored anywhere. All objects that you create are being stored in memory, right? So supposing you run your code and you create a few objects in your code. Now these are temporary. These are, as soon as you stop running a program, your object is also going to be destroyed, right? So what if you wanted to store these values somewhere so that next time you come back, you can read the values from this. Okay. Now, if you'd like to do this, one technique is you can write to your file yourself. So you can decide, okay, I want to take this object. I want to read the values from the object, store this value into the file. But an easier option is to use serialization. Wherein the same thing will happen. You will read the value from the object and serialize it. Read, next time you come back, you stop running the program, you come back later. Now the object has got persisted. Persisted meaning what? When you serialize it, you're persisting it. What do you mean by persisting it?
So saved.
Saving it somewhere, which I can read from later. So when I come back later, I can deserialize it, and this persisted object, the object that has been saved somewhere, I can read back from it and recreate the object in the memory. So that way, even if I stop running my program, I can get my object back next time I come back here, if I have serialized my object. Are we clear on this? Same thing could have been done with a file. What is the major difference here? What is the major difference? There are some inbuilt options available for serialization which don't require you to write a lot of code. Okay. Now, while saving it to a file, what are the two ways that we saved it? What are the two options that we used to save it to a file? We saw two things, two different formats. What were they?
String and binary.
Text and binary. So you saved it as a text file and you saved it as a binary file. Now, while serializing it also, there are certain formatters that are available. Okay, there are certain formatters that are available. And the role of the formatter is to serialize it in a certain format. So if there's a formatter that's available, all that the formatter is doing is what? Is serializing it in that particular format. So one formatter, for example, could be a binary formatter. And as the name suggests, how will it serialize it? In a binary formatter will serialize it in what format? In what format? No prizes for guessing. Binary formatter will serialize in the binary format. So are you all not giving me the answer? Because it's such a silly question he's asking. Why should I even bother with the answer? Is that why you're not giving me the answer? Then that's okay. Ki, kya puch raha hai? Binary formatter. What format will it be? Just remove the TER at the end. Okay. Besides the binary formatter, there are certain other formatters available. Like, for example, one of the formatters available is what if you want to serialize it as XML? So there's an XML serializer available. Or what if you want to serialize it as SOAP? There's a SOAP formatter available. What if you want to serialize it as JSON data? There's a serializer available for JSON as well. So there are inbuilt formatters available here, which you can use. And all these formatters are doing is converting your object into a particular format. Okay. So what are we saying now? We're going to save our object into a file. How should be that object saved? What should be the format of that object? Will be decided by the format. Now, can we serialize any object? Can we serialize any object? The answer is no. You can't just take a class and say, I want to serialize this. You can't do that. The class needs to be marked as serializable. The class needs to give permission. Yes, you can come and serialize me. So the class needs to be given an attribute of serializable. The class needs to be given an attribute of serializable. Now, what is this attribute? What is an attribute? An attribute is something, is basically metadata, is extra data that gives you more information about either an assembly or a class or some members of the class. What is an attribute doing? An attribute is giving you more information about either, first possibility is
Assembly.
metadata. So either about the assembly or about a class or about members of that class. Okay. An attribute is generally given in square brackets. In C# it will be given in square brackets. So I'll show you what that attribute is. So what did I say? To make a class serializable, it needs to have an attribute of serializable. If a class does not have an attribute of serializable, then serialization will not work. Are we clear on this, everybody? So all these concepts that we have, we're just going to quickly look at the code for that. Any questions before we begin? What are we going to do effectively in here? Can someone tell me in one line what are we going to do?
Store an object in file.
Into a file. Very good. Without we writing a lot of code for deciding what from the object should be stored. That will be automatically taken care of. Okay, but well said, Nitin. Any questions before we begin? All right, so let me take you through an example that I already have. Okay, there's a prerequisite here which I haven't followed. And the prerequisite is that Visual Studio needs to be run as an administrator. So when you're starting Visual Studio, right click, run as administrator, and then write whatever code you're writing. All right. So let me take you first to the class that I am going to serialize. All right. Let's take you to the class that I am going to serialize. And this is the class. Class 1, which is marked with an attribute of serializable. If you don't do this, it's going to give you an error when you try to serialize it. As simple as that. Saying that the class is not marked serializable. Now, before I get into serialization, you saw this attribute here, square brackets. So what is this attribute actually? The attribute, every attribute is actually a class that inherits from system.attribute. So there is an inbuilt class called attribute, and all your classes inherit from this class. What does an attribute do? It's basically like a marker. It just gives you extra information about that class. What extra information is it giving about this class? What extra information is giving about this?
Name of person.
That the class is serializable. Okay. Now, anyone who wants to use this class can find out about the attributes of this class using reflection. So before you can use the class, what does the compiler do? Using reflection, it checks, is this class serializable or not? And if it is serializable, then it will allow you to write code. I'll just take you to 1 minute before I get into serialization. I talked about attributes. If you expand properties, just look here, look at the screen at what I'm doing. If you expand this properties out here, there's this one file called assemblyinfo.cs. And if you open this, these are all the attributes for that assembly. Right? So whatever properties that you're giving, supposing you go and give a property here, supposing you set a property here, this property is internally also stored in where? In this assemblyinfo.cs. Like one of the things here is, for example, is what? Assembly version, assembly file version. So all of these are details about the assembly. So this is an attribute for the assembly, right? What is this an attribute of? Attribute for? This is an attribute for?
Class.
For the class. Look at this one. What is this an attribute for?
Property.
For a member of the class. In this case, a property. Are we getting this, everybody? So we have created this class as a serializable class. Now let me go into the code for doing this. What I'm going to do in my example here is I'm going to serialize it. Firstly, create an object of the class, serialize it. Then stop running my code. Stop running my code. Come back later and deserialize this object. Serialization would involve what? Converting that object into a stream of bytes and writing that stream of bytes into an array. Deserialization would be what? The reverse process would be what?
Reading data from the file and turning
Data from the file and recreating the object. Okay, so let's see how we can do that. Now I'm using 4 formatters. The 4 formatters are, first one is a binary formatter, second one is a SOAP formatter, third one is an XML formatter, and fourth one is a JSON formatter. For doing this, for using these formatters, I've added certain references. So what are the references that I've added? One is system.runtime.serialization. That was the first reference that I've added. And secondly, system.runtime.serialization.formatters.soap. So these are the 2 references that I've added out here in my code. Right? How do you add a reference? You know how to add a reference? Yes. Right click on references, add a reference, and these would be the references that you would be adding. All right. Let's get down to the code. Before the break, I want to show you at least one of them. So let's look at the code for this. This code is using a binary format. Explain to me what I'm doing in the first 4 lines. What are the first 4 lines doing?
So creating an object and assigning values to properties.
Correct. So create an object of that class and assign values to it. Now this object that I've created, I want to store it into a file using serialization. To do that, I'm going to use the binary format. Right? To use that, I'm going to use the binary format. The binary formatter has 2 main methods. What will be the 2 main methods of the binary formatter? First is
Serialize.
serialize something into a file. Second is
Deserialize.
deserialize it from a file. So 2 main methods out here for the binary format. Let's look at what serialize takes as a parameter. What does it take as a parameter? First parameter is a stream. And second parameter here is the object that you want to serialize. That's it. Just give me a stream, give me an object, I will do the rest for you. That's all that is doing. Prerequisite is what? Prerequisite is what? For this code to work, what is the prerequisite?
So attribute serializable.
the class must be marked as serializable. If you don't mark it as serializable, binary formatter says, sorry, class is not serializable. I cannot serialize it. As simple as that. All right. So look at what I'm doing here. What is this doing? What is this doing?
So creating
Creating a file.
Creating a stream out here. So creating a new file, and file stream is a derived class of the stream class. So stream S is equal to new file stream, and this here now is going to be passed to the binary formatter.serialize. What are the two things we are passing? First is the stream that we created here, and second thing is the object that we wanted to serialize. What is it going to be stored as? What will it be stored as? Stored as a file called
o.dat. That.
Okay. Done. Done. Simple code. Inbuilt features for serialization. I don't have to manually say, okay, write this into the file, write that into the file, write this property, write that property, which we were doing earlier. Second part of the code. So I do this first, file is created. I come back later, and I come back later and I do what? Exact opposite. So again, I create a binary formatter. This time I open the file in open mode rather than in create mode. Correct? So that's my stream. And I call binary formatter.deserialize. What does it take as a parameter? What does it take as a parameter? Is an string. And what does it return? What does it return? An object of a class that is being deserialized. So here on my left hand side, I'm saying class 1 O is equal to binary formatter.deserialize. But since deserialize is returning an object, but I'm having a left hand side is a class 1. I need to also typecast. That's it, done. So this part was what? What did this do for you? First 4 lines did what? Deserialized it and read it into an object. That's it. What are the next 3 lines doing? What are we doing here with the next 3 lines?
Showing output.
The properties of that object.
Just showing it to the user, saying that these are the things that you have. What are the values that I had stored? O.I, O.P1, O.P2. Those are the properties that we had. Right, that was there in the class. These are the properties that we have. O.I, O.P1, O.P2. Let's run this. Okay, I think I might, from a previous training, I would already have those files created. So let me go and delete those files. So I already have those files created. Okay. And let me delete those so that the files are not there anymore. And let's try running this. So serialize it as binary. At this point, what has it done? What has it done at this point? Created an object and stored it into the file. If you open this file now, you'll find that o.dat is shown. O.dat is in what format? What format is this file in? Yes, binary formatter will
Binary.
store it in binary. So it may not be, a lot of it may not be readable for you. Right, a lot of it may not be readable. We'll come back and read this a little later. I want to finish the second part of my code, but I'm going to show you what is happening inside. Okay. But the break looms. So before the break, let me quickly finish what I want to show you. Now I come back later. I come back much later. I've stopped running the program. So I come back after the weekend. I mean, today's Friday, then Saturday, Sunday, you have holidays. All right. Monday, let's take a break. You come back on Tuesday. 3 days later, you come back. So now this is us 3 days later. If you come back 3 days later, only in your mind, only imaginary, not really. Every day we have class. So what we do now in this case, simply deserialize. So whatever values were there last stored, now this is being picked up. 100, AAA, and whatever, 200. So these are the values that we had first stored, and now we can deserialize. Are we clear on this, everybody? So this is how you have stored this software. Any questions, any doubts with what we have done with this so far? Okay. Now the good news is, and there is no bad news. The good news is, if you have seen this code for this formatter, then the other formatters have similar code. Other formatters have similar code. Let me explain what I mean by that. What is the second one that I'm using? Second one that I'm using is what? A SOAP formatter. SOAP formatter. Now this is the code for a binary formatter. This is the code for a binary formatter. And this is the code for a SOAP formatter. This is the code for a SOAP formatter below here. Find the differences between the two codes. For serialization, find out the difference in the two codes. Is there any difference?
So formatting.
Only file extension.
And one more. File extension is perfect. But instead of using a binary formatter, what am I using? SOAP formatter. That's the only line. And of course, the extension that I've given there. Extension also could have been the same. Doesn't have to be in that. So you'll notice identical code in here between this and this, with only the name of the formatter changing and the name of the extension as he's pointed out. This is code for serialization. Let's look at the code for deserialization. This is the code for deserialization. Right? Is it any difference? Yeah. So you'll notice the code for this one is identical. The way in which you're working with a different formatter will use a similar concept. Are we clear on this? All right. I'm not running the code here. I will take a break. It's just 12 sharp right now. We'll take a break. I'm not done with this example. I want to show you a few more things, but we'll continue at 12:30. Okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. So see you after a quick break. Bye for now. Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. Checking audio. Can you hear me and see me?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
All right. Okay, let's continue from where we had last stopped. So the last example that we had taken up was how the SOAP formatter is similar in code to the binary formatter. But you know, I didn't mention it and nobody asked me. Do you all know what is SOAP? What's SOAP? Have you heard of SOAP? Yes, no.
So we have heard it in advanced Java.
Okay, so what is it?
I don't know the extent, like full form, but it is something related to web services. And like right now we use REST services, but then earlier we used to use SOAP. But I
Correct.
don't know exactly the function.
Correct. So basically, when applications want to exchange data with each other, they need to agree on a certain common format of that data. Okay, what should be the data that one application should be able to send to the other? So SOAP was first introduced as a way of describing this data. If my application is sending you some data, then both applications should agree on certain common notation, certain common protocols. And SOAP was one of the earliest formats that was available for interchange of data. Initially, it used to have SOAP had a full form. So it was actually called as a Simple Object Access Protocol, or SOAP. But now, the answer that you gave me right now, Kaustubh, is the correct answer. Right now, it doesn't have a full form. So earlier, it used to have a full form called Simple Object Access Protocol, but now it doesn't. Now it's simply called SOAP. So there is no, later versions of SOAP does not have a full form out there. And yes, what you said was also correct. Web services use SOAP to describe the web service. All right. So that was one of the earliest protocols that was used. So similarly here, SOAP is actually an XML based protocol. So similarly here, the data that you are serializing is using the SOAP protocol, is using the SOAP syntaxes to get serialized. So later when you're deserializing it, when you're reading from there, using SOAP protocols, it will be able to deserialize it. So this was the second option that we had out here. The third option that we had was to serialize it as XML itself. And if you look at the code for serializing it to XML and comparing it with what we did earlier with SOAP or with binary formatters, there are minor differences. So look at the differences. On the top is the code for SOAP, for the SOAP formatter, which was very similar to the binary formatter. But this here now is the code for a XML serializer. Firstly, the name of the class itself is different. It's not called XML formatter, it's called XML serializer. And see the differences. Can you identify the difference out here? What is the one extra thing that is being used out here in an XML serializer?
Sure, type of.
Yeah, so the XML serializer needs to know the type that it's serializing. It takes a type as a parameter. And type of is an operator which converts, or whatever name that you give out there, it returns the type of that particular type. Okay, so that's what we've done differently from the earlier one. Other than that, the code is similar. Okay, so also the code for deserialization. If you look at the code for deserialization, right? Again, here, the only difference here is what? While creating the object, it's passing the type information. Other than that, the code is similar. Right? Which brings me to the fourth one out here, which is serializing it to JSON format. Now, for serializing it to JSON format, there are different classes that are available for serializing to JSON. I'm using one such class that's available called the data contract JSON serializer. Right? And this should be there in this namespace. All right? A prerequisite before we could use this, you need to add a reference to system.runtime.serialization. So I've told you right at the beginning, these are the two references that you needed to add, and only then your code would work. So let's look at the code for JSON serialization and compare it with XML serialization. Okay, compare it with this. The name of the class now, of course, was data contract JSON serializer, and the format of this is similar. So what does it also require as a parameter is the type information. There is a difference though in all the methods that you've been writing with serializing so far. You've been calling what method so far for serialization for the earlier ones? You've been calling it as what? As dot serialize. That dot serialize has changed to what?
Right object.
To write object.
Right object.
So therefore, similarly, the deserialize would change to
Read object.
deserialize would change to read object. So the code for deserialization, instead of serialize and deserialize, the data contract JSON serializer uses write object and read object. Okay. So let's try running all of this. I was just showing you the code. I have not run it for all of them. I think I've run it only for the first one. I did only for the binary formatter. So let me run the code one by one. Code is the same. No? It's just storing that object into a particular format and then reading from it. So let's try the second one. Serialize it as so. Right? Serialization done. Stop running it. Run it again. And deserialize it as soap. So now reading the values again. Okay. This has created a file called o.soap. Next one. I'm creating a file called o.xml. So serializing it to XML, stop running it, and run it again. Recreate the object again next time as deserialize it to XML. So this is what we have done. Right? And run this again. Serialize as JSON, stop running it, and run it again and deserialize it as JSON. Okay, what has happened? Okay, I think in the copy paste, I forgot to do this. I had actually saved it as o.json. So I needed to do this. All right. So the file name I had given wrong. Let's try reading it again. Deserialization as JSON. Okay. So this is what we have done out here. All right. Let's go and examine the files itself. Let's go and examine the files itself. So it's created those 4 files for you. All right, let's start with soap. Okay, let's start with soap. And this is what you see out here. This is what you see out here. So this is a soap message. A soap message typically consists of an envelope and a body. Just like, an envelope consists of the details about the message, and the body is the actual message itself. So details about the message, and I'm not going to go into explain SOAP, but these are the protocols that it's using in SOAP, right? And these are the schemas it's using, and this is where the body starts. What does the body contain? Can you see this? What is this? Can you see this? Right? Can you see this? What is it containing? What is it containing?
Information about whatever we are trying to save as.
So basically the class name, and this was the namespace name. I don't know whether you remember what we did, but if you look at the namespace name and the class name, So this is what it's actually storing on there. That was a namespace thing. All right, and this was your class name. Achha, now what else did it store out here? What else did it store out here? Look at this. Can you identify from here what all is it storing? From here, what all is it storing? It's actually in XML format, so you should be able to identify what it's storing. Can you tell me what it's storing? First thing is this. Stored this. Then this. So the storing this. Then this. What is this? Where is this coming from? Any guesses?
It's a property, right?
Where is this coming in from? Where is this value coming in from? What have we created out here?
Property get set.
Yeah, but it's an auto property. And in the auto property, it creates, the compiler generates a variable. So what you're seeing here is the name of the variable that was generated by the compiler. So if you'll have done ILDSM, you could have actually seen this before. Then it's storing this. Can you identify what did it store here? What are these, this, and then the variable for that auto, this thing? What is it actually storing? When you serialize something, what is it actually storing here? Can you generalize and tell me what it stored? What are all these? This it stored. 1, 2, 3. And it stored the variable for the auto property. So what are all of these?
Fields.
Correct. Fields or variables it is storing.
Members.
It's not storing the property, it's storing the variable which is holding the property. So it's storing all of that. So that basically your data from the class is getting serialized. Okay. Now let me open the other one out here for you. And if I open o.dat, o.dat also, what is it first storing? Information about what? What is this? Name of the assembly, the name of the namespace dot class name, it's storing that. Then what else is it storing? Can you figure out what this is? What was this again? The variable. What about this again? Variable again. This again. The variable again. This again. What is this? The variable again. And then of course the values you can't read because they're in binary format. But at least you can see that it's storing the variable. So again, this also stored what? If you were to generalize, the binary formatter also stored the variables. Right? Okay. Look at the next one. XML. This is how it stored the XML. This is the XML serialization that happened. So what is XML storing in here? Again, starting with what? The name of the class. What else? What else has it stored?
Variables.
No, think and answer. I'll tell you the class. It is not the variables anymore.
Property.
It's not the properties also anymore. That's why I said think and answer. Look at this and tell me what it has stored.
So only like where you have written XML element and XML attribute.
Identify at least what it has stored. Chalo. It has stored P2. It has stored I, and it has stored P1. So what is common in P2, I and P1?
So only public.
Correct. That is what the answer is. So it's storing the public variables and the properties. So what is it serializing? The public members of the class, whether it's a variable or a property. That's what the XML serializer serializes. Now, I believe you all know XML, or at least know basics of XML, right? May not know in detail, but at least what is XML, what is basics of that, at least you all know. So why did P2 come out this way? And why did I and P1 come out this way? Why did P2 come out this way? What happened with P2? What is P2 now? What have I marked P2 as?
XML attribute.
XML attribute. And what have I marked P1 as?
Element.
As an XML element. Now I have not marked I as anything. I have not marked I as anything. So what did I come out as?
Element.
Element. So by default, it's an element. But you can decide or you can shape your XML by giving these different attributes out. Are you clear on this, everybody? So it's serializing the public members, and you can decide how it should be shaped by giving attributes out. Clear on this, everybody? All right. That leaves me with the last one, which was JSON serialization. Right. So what you see here is JSON data. What does it serialize? What can you see here? What does it serialize?
String.
The
String data.
data, the variables, the private and public both are there. Okay. So the XML serializer works slightly differently, but the others work slightly differently. And this is what it has serialized. This is in JSON format. You have the, how do you see read this? This is the what? This is one of them. What is this? What is the first part here is what? It's a key value pair. So this is the key and this is the value. Key is this is the value. This is the key and this is the value. Key and value. So this is what it actually holds. Are we clear on this, everybody? Now, let's come back to our serialization example. And let me take you to the class. Now you have an optional, feature out here, wherein you can implement, your class can implement iSerializable. Right? This is optional, it's not required. Even without implementing it, did serialization work? Even without my code in there, serialization still worked. But what did we need? What was compulsory was what? An attribute called serializable. Now I'm saying additionally, optionally, you can implement the iSerializable interface. And this iSerializable interface has a method here called get object data. Right. So if you look at the method out here, there's this method here called get object data, which I have written down code for. And when you use this, right, you have something called serialization info as a parameter. Now this serialization info gives you information on what you want to serialize. So instead of serializing everything, if you want to serialize only part of the data, if you want to only serialize part of the data, then you could do something like this: info.add value, the key and the value. So what am I serializing in here in this case? What am I serializing here? This is a key called I. And what is the value in here? Value is what would be held in this variable I. So instead of serializing all the properties or methods, you can override that by giving your own definition of get object data. So supposing your class had 50 properties, but you found of the 50, you want to serialize only 5. So you go and write down this get object data, and whatever properties you want to add, you can actually add them with info.addValue. Are you getting this, everybody? So instead of doing the default serialization, you can override how serialization occurs. By doing what? What do we need to do for this? By implementing iSerializable. I'm not trying that out. I'm not trying that out here. But what is the difference going to be if I did this? If I had written on the code for this, what will be the difference now? While serializing it, it won't serialize all the properties. It will serialize only the properties that you want. Or you can add more properties if you want. Clear? Yes, no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right. So to do in the lab, to try in the lab. All right. Yes. Is there a question? Somebody else. I just heard of.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
How we use this serialization in real time? I mean, there is confusion.
You're running your code.
Okay.
You create an object of some class.
Yes.
Okay. Now, at this time, if you stop running your code, what happens to that object?
It will be removed from the memory.
Correct. So I want that whatever object I've created, next time I run my code, this should also be available to me. Right?
Yes.
So what are the options out here? One possibility is you can store it into a database.
Yes.
Whatever values that you have in your object, you store it into a database. And then you come back and you read the values from the database. That could be one possibility.
Yes.
Second possibility could be instead of storing into a database, you store it into a file. How do you store it into a file? One possibility is you write your own code to store it into a file.
Yes.
Right? You don't use serialization. Third possibility is you can use serialization to implement automatically whatever data that you have would automatically be stored, and you can read it back using deserialization without you having to write much code on that. So any situation which requires you to convert your object into a file, serialization could be one of the options that would be required. Other options are storing into a database or storing into a file, but not using serialization. So now wherever you can store into a database, whatever code you want, which you can store into a database, instead of storing into a database, what can you do with that code? You can also serialize.
Serialization.
Now, what are the possibilities? Where all can you use a database? Where all can you use a database? Wherever you can use a database, there you can use serialization.
Okay. Yes, sir. Understood. Yeah.
All right. Let's move away from serialization. All right. So this is what we have tried with serialization. All these things that we are working with, all these things, whether you're working with files, whether you're serializing data, whether you're doing anything else, whether you're using link, whether you're learning about inheritance, everything that you're working with is going to be used in code further down the line. Okay. We're going to try one more thing out here, again with the console app only. We're not getting into a UI as yet. And what we're going to do next is we're going to see how we can access a database in .NET and how we can write code to, perform basic database operations, interact with the database, open connections, go and update your tables, fetch data from tables, all of that, how we can do that. And for doing that, we need to understand how a database can be accessed. Now, problem that you're faced with is you want to access a database, right? From any front end, let's say any front end that you're trying to work with. Okay. Now, if the database and the front end are from the same organization, same company, then there's no problem, right? Because then the front end might know the syntaxes and might know the protocols involved in access the database, might have certain libraries in accessing them. The problem comes up when the front end that you use and the database that you use are not necessarily of the same manufacturer. They're coming in from different companies. Now, in such a case, what would you do? What can you do for the front end to talk to the database? What is the possibilities out here? How can you make any front end talk to any database? Yes. What technique can you use?
API.
With the help of ORM.
API.
ORM.
Yes. I heard one API option one. Anything else?
ORM.
ORM also will need to know how to work with the database. Now, how will the ORM talk to any database? If in this case, the ORM becomes your, layer which is talking to the database. So how will the ORM know how to talk to the database? ORM also needs to know some way of doing that. Yes. What are the other? Somebody suggested API. API is basically a set of libraries or functions that are available out here. So what you can do is you can have some sort of common layer in between, which is understood by both the front end and the database. Right? The front end would need some library to access this layer, and the database would need to have some access to this layer. Now, one of the earliest possible ways of doing this for any database to interact with any front end. Okay. And what this should allow me is, of course, the option of multiple databases and multiple front ends. Okay, so if I have a scenario like this, so one such earliest way of communication between this was using something called as ODBC. ODBC here stood for Open Database Connectivity and allowed any front end to talk to any database as long as they both knew how to interact with ODBC. When the database had to interact with ODBC, the database would give what is known or provide what is known as an ODBC driver. And the role of the ODBC driver was to interact with this ODBC layer. ODBC actually was a was an API, was a set of functions that were available. Like, for example, it's called as ODBC 32.dll. And this ODBC 32.dll contains all the code for working with this. But this API is not easy to use. So the front end would typically have some sort of library available here, which could interact with ODBC. Right? And the job of that library was simply to make calling an ODBC function a lot simpler. Okay. Now, this was a scenario before .NET. I mean, if you had, any database or any front end wanting to talk to each other, ODBC was an option that was available. In case of Microsoft, Microsoft gave you two libraries, something called as RDO, something called as DAO, which allowed you to talk to ODBC. Right? Now, this was the scenario before .NET came in. RDO and DAO were using older technologies. We're using older technologies. All right. Later, there was another library called as ActiveX Data Objects or ADO, which was also introduced. So all these three, could work with this, but ADO did not work with ODBC. So what did ADO have now? ADO had another option out here. So if you looked at ODBC out here, so this is one option. The second option on a similar, way was something called as OLEDB. And if a database had to be OLEDB compliant, it used a ODBC driver, OLEDB driver provider. So now the term that you're using out here is no longer called as an ODBC driver, but instead is called as an OLEDB provider. Okay. And the front end did not talk with OLEDB directly. Instead, it used a library, which is a newer library that we mentioned some time back, called as ActiveX Data Objects or ADO. So this is the scenario before .NET came in. Right? This is the scenario before .NET came in. When .NET looked at these libraries, okay, so this is pre-.NET. Right? When .NET looked at these libraries, okay, just one more point I want to make. Nisha gave me feedback that, I'm not giving you materials in terms of, slides or things which explain things. I'm not going to give you that. Okay. I can give you slides and not give you code, and we can do it that way. But I don't like to work that way. I would prefer giving you actual code examples. While explaining this, I'm using, like a whiteboard, I'm using this. I'm not going to give you these things. You have to take it down. So I have told you right on the day one that you take a notebook and sit down next to it. You write down like you would write down a notebook. Or if you're too lazy to do that, do a print screen. So whatever I'm doing out here, if you are interested in taking it down, either you can write it down, or if you're not interested in taking down, if it feels too much effort in doing that, take a print screen, save your work in that way. I'm not going to sit and give you individual, notes or whatever on that. The book is available for that. You can read from there. So I've been telling you from day one that my explanation is going to be code-based. And my objective in doing that is I want you all to be able to code well. If you can code well, then you can answer any question. But if you only know theory, then you can't code well, is my belief. You're learning to be a programmer here. You're not learning to be somebody who knows theory by heart. So my focus area was, is, and is going to remain code-based. All right. That does not mean that you don't read theory. You read theory, and I've been encouraging you to do so, but not in my session. I am already over time. I've told you that. I'm already lagging behind schedule, way behind schedule. Let's not even get into how many hours behind schedule. So if I have to explain theory to you only, and then having to do practical, I will take 1 month to do that. I don't have a month with you. I have 15 days with you. In 15 days, I will give you as much code as I can. Okay, hope that clarifies that. People, I don't, you all are not the problem. The way in which you all have been taught is, partly to sort of explain for that, wherein you all are tuned to getting in a lot of theory. I don't work that way. My output here to you would be a lot of code, a lot of practical examples of what we are doing out here. And the theory books are there. You have theory books, you have other articles, you have other things where you can read up on that. I do in between, do something like this wherein I'm, explaining on screen or writing something in notepad or whatever. And that's for you to take down. I am not going to give you it on a platter. All right. So I hope that's clear if it was not clear already. So that nothing stops you from doing a quick print screen on this, or nothing stops you from writing down as I'm doing it. I'm sure you will write down faster than I'm actually, drawing on screen. I'm taking more time to draw on screen. You'll write it down much quicker. All right. So I hope that clarifies that. Okay, so the point I'm making here is this was the scenario before .NET came into the picture. All right. Now, when .NET came into the picture, they had to obviously keep sort of compatibility with previous options. They couldn't do away with previous options. So when you are working in .NET, you still have support for ODBC and OLEDB, right? But it uses a slightly different technique. It does not use these libraries anymore. These libraries that you are seeing out here, which were before .NET, namely RDO, DO, and ADO. .NET does not use these libraries anymore. They have rewritten the code for these libraries all over in .NET. Okay. So if your front end is a .NET front end, if it is a .NET front end, then these libraries are not used, and there's a reason for that. All these libraries mentioned there, RDO, DO, and ADO, all these three libraries were COM-based libraries. So if they were COM-based libraries, when you're using that, what are you using actually? When you use COM from .NET, what is that an example of? Yes, COM code being called from .NET is an example of dash code.
Unmanaged.
Sorry?
Unmanaged code.
Unmanaged code. So unmanaged code will not be run by the CLR, will not be as efficient as .NET. So one good reason for them not to use these libraries was the fact that all of these are COM-based libraries. So they said, we're going to rewrite these libraries in .NET. All right. And what they did was they retained just the name. And instead of calling it ADO, now they're calling it as what? ADO.NET. So what is ADO.NET? ADO.NET is a set of libraries or functions, which are there in those libraries, which are allowing you to write code for working with databases. All your database operations you'll be working with, when you're working with, you're using ADO.NET. Okay. ADO had a full form. ADO, the old ADO, had a full form called ActiveX Data Objects, or short from ADO. RDO was Remote Data Objects. DO was Data Access Object Library. So all of these are older libraries. These are there before you were born. That old. More than 20 years ago. Right? So these libraries, all COM libraries, .NET said we will not use any of this. We will rewrite the code, but just to give users a sense of comfort, they said we will call it ADO.NET. Now, why ADO.NET? What are the reason behind calling it ADO.NET? They said that before .NET, what are you calling it? What is the library being called before .NET? We're calling it ADO. So the library in .NET, we are going to refer to it as ADO.NET. What are the full form of ADO? ActiveX Data Objects was the full form of ADO. But ADO.NET does not have a full form. Why doesn't it have a full form? ActiveX Data Objects. ActiveX is a subset of COM. ActiveX technology is a COM-based technology, and we are not using that in .NET. So .NET being called, in the database aspect of it being called ADO.NET is not a technical reason. It is a marketing reason. Is a marketing reason. Why marketing reason? Microsoft is telling you, you know what? This is what Microsoft is telling you. Earlier, what did you work with? You worked with what earlier? ADO. In .NET, you will work with ADO.NET. That's it. ADO.NET. Not much different. This is people that at that time were told. Okay, pehle ADO, abhi ADO.NET. But ADO.NET is entirely different from ADO. Entirely. Different class names, different classes, different everything. Forget about different classes. The whole approach is totally different. Entire approach, the way you write your code also is totally different. So there's no connection with the previous ones. All right. So if you have to work with .NET, and this is a .NET front end. Let's say this is a .NET front end. Okay. And you have to work with different databases. So let's say you had different databases to work with. Okay. You have different databases to work with. .NET would use ADO.NET. Right? So these are a set of libraries or classes that you're using out here. Now, if you have to connect to a database, there were two possibilities. One possibility is you could connect via ODBC. Another possibility is you could connect via, yes, what is the second technology that was available? OLADB. But both of these are older technologies. Both of these are using unmanaged code. And both of these are mainly meant for older databases that were around at the time when .NET was launched. Both of these. Now, what .NET said is that if your database, this is your database out here, supports it, then the database manufacturer will, if the database supports .NET, the database manufacturer will give you a managed provider. And using a .NET front end, you will use what? You will use the managed provider to talk to your database. So the first term, managed, what does that mean? What does that imply? Automatically imply managed.
We can use .NET.
That means it is going to be run by the CLR. The word manage means it's going to run under the CLR. So when you're saying managed providers, it will work only with .NET. Are we getting it? And this managed code is more efficient and runs better than unmanaged code. So if you had a chance of working with all three, supposing you can work with the possibilities, you work with managed provider, or you work with OLEDB, or you work with ODBC. Supposing a database supports all three, then what should be your first choice? What should be your first choice there? For .NET, what should be your first choice?
Managed provider.
Use the managed provider. And when would you use OLEDB or ODBC? When would you use OLEDB or ODBC? Yes. When would you use that? When should you use that? Come on.
When you don't have CLR.
When you don't have a managed provider. When you don't have a managed provider. So supposing the database manufacturer does not give you a managed provider, then you can use OLEDB or ODBC to connect to your database. But given a choice of all three, the first choice should always be managed provider for that database. And nowadays, all databases, all of them have a managed provider that you can download from their data, from their website. Are you clear on this, everybody? So if you're working in .NET, this is what you'll be working with. This is the code that you'll be working with. Clear on this, everybody? Questions, if any, at this point? All right. Now, at this point, I'm going to actually ask you all to, do the next set of steps with me. We're going to create a small dummy database in SQL Server. And for all our code examples, we'll be using this example in SQL Server. Now, this is probably the first time that you'll be working with SQL Server. So for this session, right here, right now, I would like you all to do this with me. Whatever steps I'm doing on screen right now, I would like you all to repeat those steps with me on your machine. All right, this is what we're going to be doing. So we'll create the database right here today, right now. And if we have time, then we will also, in this session, we'll try writing some code, but we may not necessarily be able to reach to that point. Okay, so let's first create the database. Now, I have SQL Server on my machine. You all don't. Okay, I mean, what I'm trying to say is I have all the tools available and I can use those tools. But Visual Studio.NET also provides you with certain inbuilt tools with which you can connect to your SQL Server. So we're going to use these tools from Visual Studio. We're not going to use SQL Server. We're going to use Visual Studio to connect to SQL Server. Right? Please do this with me. Please open your Visual Studio. Open your Visual Studio and I'll try to go together. If you're stuck at any point, please call out to me. Okay, I would not know what is happening on your screens. So if you get stuck, call out to me. Don't put a message in the chat window. I will not read that message. Call out to me, speak to me. So go into the view menu. Go into the view menu and go to the SQL Server Object Explorer. View menu. Open Visual Studio, go to the view menu and go to the SQL Server Object Explorer. Now, when you install Visual Studio, it also installs a free dummy SQL Server for you. This can be used by you while coding on your current machine, but does not have all the features of SQL Server. SQL Server is a paid version, but this is the free dummy version that is installed when you install Visual Studio. So when you go to SQL Server Object Explorer, it shows you SQL Server. If you can expand on that, and it would show you something like localDB / MS SQL localDB, or if it doesn't show you MS SQL localDB, it might also show you local DB / projects V13. One of the two should definitely be there. Most probably two will be there. If two are not there, one is there, even then that's okay. Is there anyone who does not have that? Is there anyone who does not have that? All right. So I'm presuming everybody has this. If you have MS SQL local DB, if you have that, please use MS SQL local DB. That is the preferred option. For those of you who don't have MS SQL local DB, for those people only use projects V30. Otherwise, if you have this, then everybody I'm assuming is using MS SQL local DB. All right. Expand on SQL Server. Expand on that SQL Server. And when you expand on that, it shows you the databases out here. So you need to first create a database. Let's first create a database. Right click on the database, right click on the databases and choose add a new database. Right click on that and choose add a new database. Right? Okay. Now pause for a second. It's asking for the database name and it's asking for the database location. Okay. I'm going to request all of y'all to give the same names as what I am giving in my code. Now, what will be the advantage of that? The advantage of that is when I write code and if you download my code will work on your machine as well. Now, if you don't give the same names, you'll have to go and make changes in my code to make code work on your machine. All right. So in your interest, my sincere request to you is please give the same names as what I am giving. Okay. I'll give you one. Now, why am I saying this 3-4 times? Because in spite of telling you all this, there are some geniuses who will not do that. Okay. So I'll give you an example. If I call my class as employees, or if I call my table as employees, there's somebody among you all who will call it employee. There's somebody who will call it EMP. Somebody who will call it TBL_EMP. I'm not joking. I'm doing this multiple times. There will be some geniuses who give different names. Why? No, I can give a name if I want to. Why should I follow his name? That is the. So I'm requesting you, if you want, I'll fold my hands too. Requesting you with folded hands. Please give the same names that I'm giving out. Okay, now 5 times I've said that. Hopefully you follow. So I'm calling this database as JK for not Jammu Kashmir, but Juhu and Kharghar, July 2022. Okay. Please give the same name. Later, you can create a different name on your own for your own practice. That is different. JK July 2022. That is the name of the database that I'm asking you to create. Okay. Once you say OK, it creates a database for you and it shows it to you on the left-hand side. So I have previous databases created from previous trainings, but you all should have one database created there called JK July 22. Expand on that. Expand on that. And you see the tables out there. Now I'm going to create 2 tables, one called departments and one called employees. Again, I request you, please give the same table names. Please give the same column names and column types. Right click on tables. Okay, now 1 second before you do this. If you all know your SQL, if you know your SQL, you can right click on that JK July 22. You can right click on that and say new query. You could do that. You could give a new query, and here is where you could give your, query, SQL queries that you want. You could do that if you want to. Okay, but I'm not doing that. I'm showing you an easier way of doing it, where you don't have to write the query out here. So what am I asking you to do? Right click on tables and choose add new table. Right click on table and choose add new table. So it takes you to a screen on the right hand side where it shows you on the top, it shows you the the columns that you want to add, and on this and the bottom of the screen, it is actually generating the create table statement for you. Okay, so look at what I have out here. Look first, don't type. Look here for a second. I'm creating employee number. Employee number is being picked up as a primary field out here. You see this on the left hand side. It shows you as a primary key out there. Employee number of type integer. Secondly, don't type. Look here what I'm doing. I'll give you time to type it out. Name, you can keep this as varchar 50, right? Basic, I'm keeping this as decimal 18,2. So I'm going and typing out 2 out here. Okay. So there's an option here for allow nulls. I'm deselecting that option. And finally, okay, I'm sorry, I have not created the departments table. So good, you have not typed it out. Deleting this. First, I need to create departments, right? I want to create a foreign key out here. So let's start with department number and department name. Department name is varchar 50. I'm not changing that. Okay. All right. Now look at what I'm doing out here. Down here, what is the name of the table it's showing you by default? It's saying create table dbo.table. So that table name, I'm changing it to departments. I'm giving this as department. And this is how you would be doing this. Now, instead of doing it this way, you can also go and type out the SQL there directly, which I've actually put into the chat window. So if you want, you can do it that way, but ensure that your SQL that is generated is similar to the SQL that I have, including the table name, including the column names. Are we clear on this, everybody? This is what I have done for you all. So this is what I have generated. So I'm waiting for a minute while you do that. Either you can do it the way I did it, or type it out, or copy paste from my code, but make sure that it is identical. All right, and I'm waiting for you to do that, and then we'll take it forward from there. All right. Once you have finished doing that, right? Once you're finished doing that, there is a button here which says update. There's a small button here which says update. Okay. So look here for a minute first. Don't, it'll be difficult for you to do both at the same time. So look at what I'm doing, and I'll give you time again to do that. So I can do an update. It'll prompt me with what I'm updating. It'll show me what I'm updating. It'll show me this. It'll show me the actions what I'm updating. And there's an option here for update database. There's an option for update database. So this is what I'm going to ask you to do. All right. Now, once you update the database, it shows you update completed successfully. And that means your code has run correctly. Okay. Now, while doing this, sometimes it gets hung. It gets stuck. All right. It does not respond. And this could be due to various factors, including, a slower machine or some other, problem with SQL Server or whatever. So it could give you an error. Error meaning it will not give an error. It will just simply hang, not do anything at all. All right. Now, if that happens, so first option I'm asking to do is what is to do it with update. And if update works fine, we are done. No problem whatsoever. If that happens, then you copy this code. And you do what we showed you earlier. What is it we showed you earlier? Come back to the left-hand side and go in for a new query. Paste your query here. And run from here. There's a button here for execute. Are you getting it? So you can execute the query here. Don't do both. If the first option works, then great. If the first option is getting hung for whatever reason, then I'm showing an alternate. Again, let me show you what I did. Right click on the database, choose new query, and paste that. Either paste that or type out the query yourself directly. And then choose execute from here. So either of the two options, don't do both. Right? In my case, this has worked. I'm giving you 2 minutes to complete doing this. Call out to me if you're getting stuck. Okay. There's no way I would know from here whether you're doing it correctly or not.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
In the earlier method, we have to click on update.
Correct. When you click on update, it will show you a dialog box. There again, you click on update database. And while doing that, it may get hung. I'm telling you repeatedly. It may not work correctly. And this is not problem with you, problem with Visual Studio. So then I've showed you the alternate way.
Hello, sir. I don't get that SQL servers. There are
You're not seeing SQL Server in what?
Means my server explorer in view.
View menu.
SQL Server
SQL
Object
Server
Explorer.
Object Explorer is not
Yes.
there. What is
Yeah,
not there? This option itself is not there.
Option is there, sir, but the server is not there in SQL Server. Means they are. I trying to add them also, but
It's
they are.
blank. These are blank.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so that means when you're installing the software, it has not installed all the components. When you're installing it, you have not installed all the components. So there was a component for databases which has not been installed correctly. You can go and fix that installation. If how did you all install this? Nisha ma'am must have given you some instructions to install it, right?
Yes.
And there were certain options selected.
Yes, sir.
So make sure all those options are selected and then do that again, and then that should work.
Okay.
And if it is not working still, then in the lab session, then ask help from whoever, whichever lab you are in. I mean, either Nisha ma'am or Vipul sir or whoever, or I'm there, whoever is there, ask us for help.
Okay, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, just same thing for people who are having a similar problem. At least note down the steps, and then later when it's installed, you can come and create the tables. Yes.
Sir, how we can run this query? Create table. I have written this query, but there is
right click, new query. After you paste it, there's a button, your first button here which says execute. Here, you see this?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Trying.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, it is showing connection ready, but it is showing 2 errors also.
What are the errors?
Method must have return type. There is no argument here that it corresponds to required format.
Can you just copy paste my code and try running it? It will work fine.
Okay.
Can you just copy paste what I have given there in the chat window and run that as a new query? That also will work fine.
Okay. Yes.
Okay, because rather than seeing what mistake you're making, I'm just giving you the right way of doing it. All right. After you're finished doing this, after this command is finished working, do not keep the query window open. If you keep the query window open and you try to run some other query, then it will try to run this query once again. So after you've finished writing the query, after you finished running the query, rather not writing it, close the window. So even this window that you see, even this design window that you see, close it. And you'll find that the table has been created on the left-hand side. So if you go into tables on the left-hand side, it should show you that departments table that has been created. All right. We're going to create a second table for employees. So again, please look at what I'm doing and then you can do it at your own pace. I'll give you time to complete it. Right click on the tables and choose add new table. Right click on the tables and choose add new table. This time I'm going to create one for employees. So employee number, which is int, name, varchar of 50. Okay, don't allow nulls. Basic, which was decimal 18,2. Okay, so I'm going and making changes here. And department number, which was an int. Okay. All right. Now, I want to also create a foreign key constraint. Okay, I want to create a foreign key constraint. To create a foreign key constraint, you can actually type it out. If you all know the query, you can directly type it out. But I'm going to use this option here. Before we do that, what is the name of the table that I'm asking you to create out here? It's called employees. Right? So this is what I'm asking you to create. Now let me complete the code for the foreign key thing also, and then I will show you. I'll copy paste the code together. So see what I'm doing. Right click on foreign keys. I'll do that again. Right click on foreign keys and choose add a new foreign key. When you add a new foreign key, it's giving you the name, a default name for that. Ignore that. Don't change anything there. You can come and type out the name out here. So foreign key, it's asking for the name of the constraint, any name. Okay. So I'm calling it FK underscore employees underscore departments. Right. And this is what I'm giving out here. First thing is I want your help. I want your inputs in giving me this. What is the name of the column out here? Foreign key column in employee, which I'm linking with the other. Yes.
Department number.
Department number. References. Which table?
Department.
Department.
And which column?
Department number.
Department number.
Department number. Right. So this is what we are giving out here. And this is the code that we are going to run out here. So I'll just copy paste the same thing into your chat window and show you how to do that. But I've also shown you how to do that. So you can try doing it this way. If you're stuck at whatever point and if you're not getting the correct SQL, then copy paste my SQL. After doing this, after completing this, what are you again going to do? What is the next step after typing out this? Is update the table. All right. And if it works correctly from here, no problem. Otherwise, use it with the query like I showed you. So go ahead. I'm giving you 5 minutes to complete this.
असं रडक्याला घेऊन घेतलंच नाही पाहिजे हे नाही खायचं आणि ते नाही खायचं.
Your mic is on. Somebody, your mic is on. We can hear what's happening.
So how to add foreign key?
Can you put done in the chat window once you are done? If you're done with this part, can you just put a done in the chat window? So I know that you all are finished this.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Is it compulsory using MS SQL or I can use Project B13?
You can
Data.
use
Local DB
Yeah, yeah.
project V13.
Yeah, use that.
Okay, thank you.
The only thing is when you're writing the connection string in code, instead of MS SQL local DB, change that name to projects V13. We'll be writing code in some time. So there,
Okay.
just make the necessary change. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So I've seen about 10-15 dones. Can others also please put in a done? That helps me identify when you'll have finished. Yeah, for updating, if it is taking time, Aditya, then it's getting stuck, no? And after 1 or 2 minutes, it doesn't happen. Just close that, copy paste that code and run it through the query. This is a known problem with SQL Server. Okay. I'll request all those who are done to please put in a done. It helps me identify when you are done. Okay, 30 seconds more to complete it. If you're getting stuck, then you can catch up later. You can stop putting the messages of done. Okay, those who are done, those who have finished with this, again, remember what we should do after you're finished running the query. Remember to close the window, otherwise it will cause you problems later. Do not keep the window open, all right, after you finish running your query. So those who have finished doing this, please close the window and check on the left-hand side, your departments and employees table should be created for you. Okay.
Sir,
Yes.
sir, I didn't change that default table name to
So I have
employees.
copy pasted it. I have copy pasted that. You can create one more table. You can just run that query again. In the chat window, I've given the query. No?
So how to delete that table?
How you can right click and delete it. Right click and delete.
Okay.
Okay. And instead of now spending time, you can go in for a new query and just copy paste that statement that I have given, because if my table name and your table name is the same, my code will work on your place also.
Okay.
Okay. Now, I'll request all of you to again have a look at what I'm doing, and then I'll give you time to do that. So right click on departments, right click on departments, and there's an option here for view data. So do that with me. Right click on departments and go into view data. So this shows you all the records right now. It also allows you to make changes here itself. So which means that you don't need to even write down an insert statement and whatnot. You can directly put in the values in here if you want to. So put in some dummy values. Put in 3-4 dummy values. We're going to be using this in our code. All right. Whatever. Now these values can be different. You don't have to have the same values that I have. Okay. Whatever values that you want, put in some dummy values. How do you save the record? If you go to any other record, the record that you're making changes on gets saved. If you stay on the same record, it does not get saved. So to save the record, just go to another record, make a change and go to the other record. And you can make changes. You can make an update or a delete or even an insert out here itself. Okay. All right. Similarly, add at least 2-3 records in employees. And we can add more in our code as we go along. But just to begin with, just to give you some dummy data to play around with, add 2-3 records in employees as well. So again, what would I do for employees? Right click on employees and view data. Go and add the data. Remember, we have added a foreign key on the department number. So department number must exist in the departments table. So add in a few records out here, please. I'm just adding the names that I see on the right hand side. All those who have turned their cameras on, I can see them. So Shiv Kumar, how much salary do you want?
As per your choice, sir.
No, you decide in your database, you can put your. Okay. I see Dishi is next. Right. Dishi, how many dollars do you want? Right, whatever. So add your own numbers. Put in 3-4 records at least out there. Okay. We have multiple Adityas, but I'm just adding one out here. Whatever records you want to have, please add. So we're done with this.
Sir,
All right.
How to save it, sir?
Just go to another record. Just go to another record. Whatever record you're on, just go either before, later, go to any other record, it gets saved. But if there are any errors, then it will show you an error on that. Like for example, what if I did this? What if I did this? Let's say I gave 3 again. Okay, I gave 3 again. Why would this not work? Why would this not work?
primary key doesn't contain
Primary
duplicate.
key constraint. Or if I gave an invalid department number, I don't have that department number 44, for example, and I go to the other, this thing is the foreign key constraint. So as long as the value is correct, okay, it would allow you to save it. The value is incorrect, it would not allow you to save it. How do you delete something? Select the row and press delete. It will prompt you, do you want to delete? And yes, you can delete if you want to. Okay. So right click and refresh. If you right click and delete, you could delete that. All right. So we added a few records here. Those who have not been able to add the records, we will, add them a little later. Or you can, in the break and the post this thing, you will add them. Okay. All right. Focus on this again. I'm going back into an explanation. Now, if I had to connect from my front end to any database, the first thing that you need to decide is which of the libraries do you want to use? Do you want to use one of the managed providers, or do you want to use OLEDB, or do you want to use ODBC? The first thing that you do is you decide that. Now, if you're working with, let's say, SQL Server has a managed provider called, it's in this namespace, system.data.sql client. This is the managed provider for SQL Server. Similarly, if you had other databases, you would need to download their database. They download their managed provider from their database site or whatever, and you can use that. If on the other hand, if you have to use any of the others that we had, like the existing ones, a system.data.oledb, all right, or what is the other one? System.data.odbc. So these are the ones that we have out here, or any of the other managed providers provided by that database. So you could go ahead and write down code from here. Now the classes that we'll be using in all of them, all of the classes that we're using will have similar code. Now, why would they have similar code? They'll have similar code because they all inherit from the same base class and implement the same interfaces. So if I'm writing code with SQL Server and tomorrow instead of SQL Server, let's say if you have to connect to Oracle, your code will not change. The code that I'm writing for SQL Server and Oracle will not change. Only what will change is which managed provider you're using. So that is a benefit that you will get. If you learn how to code with one database, you will learn how to code with the other databases as well. Okay. Now, irrespective of which library that you're using, the topmost class that you'd work with, the topmost class to connect to a database that you would work with is going to be an connection class. Okay, is the connection class. But there's no class called connection. Hold on. There's no class called connection. The name of the connection class is SQL connection if I'm using SQL Server. If I'm using OLADB, the name of the class is not SQL connection, it will be OLADB connection. If I'm using ODBC, it would be ODBC connection. If I'm using Oracle, it would be Oracle connection. So depending upon which library you're using, this connection class would change. For SQL Server, as I said, this is SQL connection. But all classes are not going to be called SQL connection. Are you getting what I'm trying to say? If you're using Oracle, this would now be called Oracle connection. So the topmost class that you would use to connect to a database would be your connection class. Now, if I'm using SQL Server, I am calling it SQL connection. Okay. Now I'm going to put in a small red dot out here. I'm going to put in a small red dot out here, indicating that this is actually, do I have a dot where there's some shapes out here? No, where are they? Okay, forget that. Let's take this. Indicating what? That this here, the red dot indicates what? That this depends upon what? Which library you're using. That's my notification out here. What does the connection class allow you to do? The connection class allows you to first establish a connection to your database. So once you're connected to the database, now to connect to the database, what will you need to give? What authentication would you need to give? You need to give the username, password, and then you're able to connect to the database. So that's the first step. Once you're connected to the database, what is the next step? What would you need to do next after that? Suppose you're connected to the database. What next would you need to do?
Use database.
When you use a database, what are the typical things that you do with the database?
You have to communicate with database.
Yeah. So what are the basic operations that you perform with the database?
Queries you have to perform.
DDL
What queries
operation.
would you write? Queries for what?
Insert, update, delete.
Insert, update, delete, select. These are typical things that you would do out here. Basically your CRUD operations. What is CRUD? C for?
Create.
R for?
Read.
U for? Update, and D for delete. Right? Now, out of these, if you had to work with insert, update, or delete, from these, if you had to work with insert or update or delete, only with insert, update, or delete. I'm not talking about select. If you have to work with insert or update or delete, then you can, you can actually create an SQL command class and that's it. You don't need to do anything else. So your basic insert, update, delete. What would you need to do? Create a SQL connection first. And second thing is create an SQL command. And that's it. That would be all the code that you need to write. Okay. But if you had to now fetch records using a select. Let's say you said select star from table name and you have to now fetch records. Then this is not enough. Then you don't stop at connection and command. When do you stop at connection and command? What are the three things that you need to do for connection command? What three things can you do? Either
Insert, update.
Insert, update, delete. These are good enough. But if you want to fetch records, now there are two possibilities of how you can fetch records. Today I'm going to discuss only one possibility. So to fetch records, you can use what is known as a data reader. In case of SQL Server, what will this be called? In case of SQL Server, this will be called as what? SQL data reader. And what does the SQL data reader do? What is it going to be used for? In what situation would you use this?
For select.
Fetching data.
For fetching the data. For your select operation, which will return to you multiple records. Okay. Write down what I'm saying next. The data reader is a connected forward only, read only set of records. The data reader is a connected forward only, read only set of records. Full stop. It is also called a fire hose, F-I-R-E, fire, H-O-S-E, hose, a fire hose cursor. It is also called as a fire hose cursor. Okay, full stop. Okay, now listen. Okay, I use three words to describe it. First word I use is connected. What does connected mean? What would connected mean? Yes. What does the word connected? What do you understand by the word connected? As opposed to disconnected. Disconnected is a different way. Connected is a different way. What do you understand by the word connected?
Join.
When you are reading the data reader, when you are accessing the data reader, the connection to the database must be kept open. So where is the connection to the database? Where is that being created? At what point is it being created? What object is connecting to their database?
SQL connection.
SQL connection. So the SQL connection must be open when you're reading from the data reader. That's what I mean by connected to the database. Are we clear on this, everybody? Okay. So if your connection is not open, your data reader will give you an error saying that I cannot read it. Connection is not available. The second thing that we need to be aware of is we said it was forward only. So what do I mean by forward only? What do you understand by forward only? The SQL data reader is a forward only way of reading the records. What do you understand by that?
Once it has read it, it won't go back to read again.
Once it has not read it, once it has read it, then it will not go back to the previous record. Excellent. So the forward only simply means that while reading the records, it's only going to go in one direction. let's say I read record number 1, record 2, record 3, record 4. If I've read record 4, I can't go back to record 3. It doesn't allow me to go back. That is your forward only. And thirdly, read only. That is the easiest one. What does read only imply? Yes. What is the read only part of it?
Can only read it from the select query can be used.
You cannot make any updates to it. You cannot change the data while you're accessing the data reader. Okay. The data is read only data. So these are the 3 key characteristics of a data reader: connected, forward only, and read only. We gave it another name. I said it is also called as a fire hose cursor. So what is the cursor? What is the cursor? Another word
pointing to the manager.
Sorry?
Pointer which pointing to the memory.
No, not that. In databases. What is the cursor? Have you not heard of a cursor in databases?
For iterating the data.
Yes. So what is that? A cursor is a set of records that you read from the database. Now, what does the word fire hose cursor mean? Have you all seen a fire hose? The pipe that firemen carry? Yes?
Yes.
So what comes out of that? Fireman carrying that pipe. What comes out of that pipe?
Water in a force.
Very good. Water at a great force. All right. Now, when you talk about a fire hose cursor, you're talking about a cursor which is throwing out records at a great speed. So fast, very quick. So data reader has 3 properties: connected, read only, forward only. And these 3 properties are the fastest way of accessing any set of records. And such type of cursors are called as fire hose cursors. So the data reader is the fastest possible way in which you can read records from your database. Fire hose cursors are the fastest way. And what are the characteristics of fire hose cursor? The same as what we said for data reader. 3 characteristics. What are the 3? Connected, read only, and
Forward only read.
Are we clear on this? All right. So for reading records, the best option is SQL data reader. There is another option which we will talk about in the next session. Okay. Now take a screenshot of this. Don't make me write it down for you. I'm not going to write it down. Take a screenshot of this. Those are your notes, which you will have not been taken down. And then if you ask me, give me notes, I'm not going to give you notes. All right. We have not seen any code on this, but remember this, we will be tomorrow morning, first thing in the morning, we will jump into the code. What all will we do? We will write code to connect to my database. We will write code to work with commands, to work with the data reader. And then there are other objects that I have not discussed out here. So we'll be looking at that. So all of tomorrow, we'll be looking at code from how to connect from your front end to your database. That is the thing that we'll be checking in our code tomorrow. So in case you are interested, you can read up on that and come. It will help you in the session. Are we clear on this, everybody? All right. I am stopping here for the day. We have gone past our time. But any last questions before we disconnect? All right. See you tomorrow then. All right. Or see you in the lab in some time. Okay.
Yes.
All those who have not got the database installed for whatever reason, please get help from whoever is in the lab. Whatever lab you go to, get help from them and make sure that it is installed, because all code from now on is going to use databases. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, sir.
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 All right, students. Yeah, I have posted the link in the chat box. You can start filling the link.